Well, it's another Sunday. Hey, everyone. What a tall tower. You might even call that a giant tower. It is oh so tall. Men do love their tall towers. I believe it was Olena who pointed that out. Thank you all of you who are here live and were kindly and patiently waiting for me to get the show on the road. We are starting good 20 minutes late. This is about as late as I have been. But I was once again fighting with YouTube, trying to turn off the gamification of the chat, which I actually did turn off, and then they're just doing it anyway. Much like I turned off the AI ad placement, and they just do it anyway. Every video, you look up how to change it, you make the change, they just do it anyway. And that's why I appreciate you guys supporting me on Patreon, because for whatever reason, I'm here making content on YouTube and fighting against YouTube to do it. And it's just how it is in this crazy world. Sean, here with 1,000 voices, thank you for joining me here at 1:20 in the afternoon. We are still going to finish in time to watch the NBA Finals. That gives us a cool 3 hours and 40 minutes. I think we can do this.
Yeah, we'll actually, it's just a countdown. We're not even going to talk about Giants today.
So what are the keys to the Thunder adjusting in game 2? Now,
all right.
Hey guys, I guess it is 4:20 somewhere on the East Coast. That's where a lot of you are watching. So thank you for that. And we are here to talk about Giants. Why so many Giants? Not only are there the big hairy giants in the north, there's a lot of stuff that's described as giants. There are trees and castles and mountains and things. There's people that act like giants. And so we're going to explore. There's a Titan of Bravos, you know, just a lot of giants. Torment Giants, Bane. And so we're going to talk about all that stuff. And I will just, by way of preview, I will pull down this tab here. Characters like Dunk, Sandor, the Cleganes, Brienne, House Umber, the Baratheons, the Night's Watch, several members of the Night's Watch, randos like Lem Lemoncloak and Raleigh Duckfield, you know, people like Khal Drogo and Makoro, Meleys the Monstrous, even Melisandre is on here. And basically what's going on is that George has pulled some part of giant folklore into these character arcs. And so we're going to go through giant folklore, mostly Norse and Greek, and a little bit of Germanic, Proto-Germanic myth. And then we are going to talk about how all these concepts are used in Ice and Fire. And so what is George doing with the giants is, you know, the deeper symbolic mystery. That's another thing we'll probe today. So everything giant. I've got my San Francisco Giants jersey on. Sean, you have a giant drink of some kind?
I do, yeah. This is blood orange Italian soda with red wine and grenadine, and I call it Giant's Blood. And to cap it off, it's in a Finding Nemo shaker for no reason.
Somebody in the chat said, I look like the player and you look like the coach. That's correct. You actually are a coach.
Yeah, I had a tournament this morning. It was probably the end of our season, our last tournament. God, I went blurry. I don't know why. All right, I'll come in and out if I have to. But yeah, just big day. Had the tournament, put together IKEA furniture, fought my dogs, and I'm very ready to settle down, talk about Giants.
Cool. Well, we see darkly as through a mighty glass, or whatever that Bible verse is. What's going on with you? It's going to be right back. Hey, it's my whole studio. Welcome to my house. And yeah, that's it, Mark. You know what I'm talking about. Hey, coach. Put me in, coach. Put me in.
I'm a real boy. Oh, God. All the parents are fighting for playing time. All right.
Do I prefer dip or big league chew? Terrible.
Yeah.
All right.
Start yelling.
Seriously, I will try not to lose my mind about this. But you saw me last week on the stream. I went and looked up, how do you turn off the gamification of the chat? You watched me do it. I clicked the only option there is for that. And here we are again. Compete amongst yourselves. It's a blood sport. I was born to the darkness. Anyway, all right. So, it's been a minute since we did the Bane voice. Okay, so giant mythology, Sean. Fee fi fo fum.
And me trying my best not to plug my Beowulf video by talking about Grendel the giant. But
Oh, I put Grendel in here as under the wild man of the woods. I'm the one who added Grendel to the outline, not you. But yes, do plug since you've half plugged. Why don't you full plug?
yeah, get a full plug in. Yeah, so I released part 2 of my Tolkien's Doomed Hero Beowulf. I'm very proud of it. I'm now working on a Patreon video called Gilgamesh and the Quest for Immortality, and another Patreon video about the fight between Sam and Shelob and the original intentions Tolkien had for the scene and the original characters who were going to be fighting. So, lots going on. Very excited about it. Please go watch my video. Very proud of it. And yeah, lots of giant stuff in there. Lots of giant stuff today. Drinking my giant cocktail here and a giant energy drink.
And of course, George is a fan of the New York Giants, and just get it out of the way. Woondag, Darwoon, whatever his name is. The joke is 1-1, like the number 11. Famous New York Giants quarterback named Phil Simms wore number 11. And so 1-1, the Giant destroys Patrick of Kings Mountain, who has Dallas Cowboy regalia. And so there's a football joke there. Pretty much everyone's heard that before. But yeah. Go Giants or something.
Yeah, he's somehow a fan of the New York Giants and the New York Jets, which is supposed to be illegal.
For people who care about sports more, I guess so, yeah. George doesn't. He's a fantasy nerd. He's like, I like the both teams. Anyway, I think he just wants the city to be happy. Maybe that's it.
That's a stretch.
Yes, Blue Canary by the light switch. They Might Be Giants. I'm a fan. Sean, you probably like They Might Be Giants, don't you?
Yeah, and Young the Giant. That's another good one.
I don't know that.
Oh, you would like him. Yeah.
Is he a rapper? Sounds like a rapper.
No. It's kind of like indie rock.
Oh, okay. I see. One of those sort of mysterious indie rock band names. I got it. Yeah. Okay. In any case, Giants. They are. What are they? They are big things. Giants in general. Speaking in general, giants are not always huge. They frequently are. It seems that in the Proto-Indo-European mythology family tree, they represent strength, power, size, permanence, implacability. They often represent the forces of nature that are sort of unstoppable and irresistible. And in Greek mythology in particular, the word Titan means to strain. And all the Titans are involved in defining the boundaries of the cosmos, holding up the world, separating earth and sky, the four cardinal directions, or principles, which are unyielding. So all these things can be associated with giants. And what's interesting is that they can't be reasoned with or appealed to or prayed to like the gods. The gods, the word God derives from a root which means the ones who hear. And that is the function of gods in mythology. They are intercessors. They hear our prayers and they do stuff. The Titans and giants are not like that. They cannot be reasoned with. You'll see that the heroes who go against them either have to outwit them or trick them or straight up slay them. You can't plead with them. You can't reason with them.
Yeah, and we get a lot of a crossover. One thing that we talked about writing this script is kind of like, where do you draw the line between, we're talking about drawing the line between giants and gods, but then there are, you're drawing the line between, in Greek mythology, titans and giants. And it's interesting, and it is a hard line to delineate between these various groups. And then you get into Norse mythology, and it's even harder to delineate between giants gods, dwarves, elves, whatever.
And the main thing to keep in mind is that what we're looking for is the inspirations that George has drawn from to create his giants. And so he is drawing from the giants, the titans, the Jotun, the cave trolls, gnomes, not gnomes, the trolls and the ogres is what I meant to say. In a general sense, they share a lot in common. When you get into the specific mythologies, then it's what Sean is saying, where it's sometimes there's some overlap. You see some characters like Mimir, who might be a Jotun, or in other cases, he's a Vanir. That's okay. We're not really going to worry about that today, Sean. We're not going to worry about that at all. We're just going to set that aside because it doesn't matter. What matters is that George is drawing inspiration from all this stuff. So if you want a correct lesson about which ones are Vanir and Jotun and why we think that, you can go do that research on your own, essentially. But we will try to be as correct as possible. But the main thing to remember is that these concepts are somewhat fluid. And even though we're comparing different Proto-Indo-European mythologies as being similar, they're not the same. And so the giant Titan figures in Greek myth are kind of similar to the Norse ones, but not exactly so. That being said, disclaimer. What we see is that a lot of times the heroes that go against the giants are either trickster heroes who have to outwit the giants, or they are powerful heroes like Thor, who alone possess the ability to slay these giants. Sometimes not. And so one of the things the two of the main things that are associated with giants are obviously mountains and the ocean. The ocean being a giant chaotic thing that you can't control. It's irresistible, implacable, overwhelming. Mountains, seem to be resistant to time. We know that they do, of course, erode over millions of years. But from the perspective of a human, not geological time, the mountains are permanent. The weather changes, storms come, the mountain is still there. So you see the similar principle here. And I pulled a couple of giant mountain quotes. Sean, would you like to kick off the reading?
Sure. Looming over them all was the jagged peak called the Giant's Lance, a mountain that even mountains looked up to, its head lost in icy mists 3.5 miles above the valley floor. Over its massive western shoulder flowed the ghost torrent of Alyssa's tears.
So it's kind of cool that humanization, the personification of the mountain. The other mountains look up to it. It's got a shoulder, So, and of course, we'll talk.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's also just a spot-on description of a number of frost giants where they talk about them with their head being, above the clouds and, how tall they are. But really, that's flavor text to make us understand that they are representing mountains.
Exactly. And so you see George demonstrating the understanding of the symbolism and incorporating it. And of course, Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, in many ways is a human personification of the giant's lance. And we'll talk about that, of course. And so here, this is a quote about the Bones Mountains, the tallest mountains in the world. The hills grow wilder and steeper, and soon enough the mountains appear in the far distance, their peaks seeming to float against the eastern sky. Blue-gray giants so huge and jagged and menacing that even Lomas Longstrider, that dauntless wanderer, if tales be true, lost heart at the sight of them. And so this is another thing about giants, is that they inspire fear and confusion and various other mental states which you have to fight against. And in fact, in Norse myth, just skipping ahead a little bit, the giants in particular represent the chaotic mental forces such as anger or confusion or fear. And so a lot of times there's a layer to the myth when people like Odin or Thor are battling against giants and going into the realm of the giants. It serves as a metaphor for our inner space, for contesting against fear, confusion, again, things like that. And so this has eventually led Sean to the idea of the big dumb giant. But originally, it's not that they were dumb, it's that they caused confusion and stupor, paralyzation, fear, and things like that.
Yeah, something that you mention a lot is the shamanic element of this. Is that when you're dealing with those things, when you're dealing with those emotions, when you're dealing with like really things that require a greater understanding but are at the same time chaotic, it requires a certain amount of shamanism to engage with it, and that's why you always talk about Odin being able to interact with them, whereas Thor, as kind of an aspect of him, fights against them. Oh, you're muted.
Exactly. And shout out to Fortress of Lug, of course, tremendous YouTube channel. We're all a fan. He really highlighted this, how Thor and Odin have these different strategies for dealing with the giants. You know, Thor is all opposite opposing them. He has the strength to oppose them, and he slays them and defeats them, or tries to. And in contrast, Odin, he's fraternizing. He's mixing it up. He's tricking them. He's sleeping with them and having children with them and stealing stuff from them, riddling with them. And so this is representative of the shaman and the way that the shaman walks with one foot in madness and tangles with these dark forces and attempts to create out of them, Sean.
Order from chaos.
Exactly.
It's another iteration of the chaos comp, whether you're dealing with an impossibly giant serpent dragon figure of the primordial ocean, or whether you're dealing with these concepts one after another that are represented as giants. The idea is the same.
Right. And so it's representative of these two human strategies to deal with things. Like one way to you can stand in direct opposition to things like fear and confusion, or you can try to like explore it and overcome it that way. So it's a little bit of psychology going on here. But yes, this is all about the relationship of order and chaos. We talk about the chaos conf mythology, and Sean, it's really striking me the more I study this stuff. It's not just the individual myths about slaying dragons and giants, chasing away the chaos and ordering it and creating the world. It's literally all of it. So the Greeks in particular, many of their god pairings are opposites, or you see that the opposites give birth to one another. Night gives birth to day, and so on. This is talking about these cycles, right? Like literally, night gives birth to day when the morning comes. Okay, and you've seen that language. People talk about that. Spring gave birth to summer, gave way to summer, et cetera, et cetera. And what they have this principle called eros, which we think of as eroticism and love and sex and stuff. But the eros principle is actually bigger than that. It's the principle that makes all of these opposites talk to each other and commune with each other and engage in these cycles. And so eros is this spirit animating force that actually exists between all of these opposites. And it's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, opposites attract. It's very much represented. If we see something in humanity, whether it's psychological or whether it's us just trying to bring order to the chaos that we find in nature, order to the chaos in terms of making civilization, whatever it is, when we notice it, when we feel it, we're going to represent them as concepts in stories. And that's absolutely giants. And you bring up the Greeks, and it's, the two really foundational events that they have are the Titanomachy and the Gigantomachy, the Titan War and the Giant War. And they both fulfill a similar role in kind of showing how the gods are creating order out of chaos.
That's exactly it. And so the giants, to the extent that they represent either forces of nature or the boundaries of the cosmos, they have to be harnessed or mastered by the civilizing gods. And we see that over and over. Like, for example, in Irish mythology, we've got the Firbolg and the Fomorians, who are both races of giant beings, monstrous beings. They're tied to the land and the earth. And the Tuatha, who are the civilizing gods associated with light and air and art and craftsmanship and skill, they are the ones who master these two Fomorians and Firbolg. But they do it by fighting with them and then intermarrying and making pacts and things. So it's, again, talking about how, like, we have to negotiate with these things. Fear always will exist. You know what I mean? Like greed, strife, whatever it is. And so we've got to, like, understand and interact with these things and civilize them and master them. And so this is the personal layer of the order and chaos mythology. So, and as Sean was saying, we've talked about the chaos conf motif, the idea of the storm god slaying the dragon, frequently making the world out of the dragon in some way, or releasing the water that nourishes the world in the case of Ritra. And giants perform the same role frequently. They live in caves. They're monsters. They're hoarding divine objects that humans want to steal and possess, just like the dragons in their golden hoard. And if you think of Ymir, the Ymir myth, or why don't you recount that for the folks?
Sure. And, everybody just go ahead and write down the name of the series that we're talking about here before we get into this. In the beginning of Norse mythology, there were two realms, Niflheim and Muspelheim. And Muspelheim was a realm of fire. Niflheim was a realm of ice. And where they met and the ice melted was eventually created, grown from all of this, is the body of Ymir, the original giant, the original frost giant. And he's so huge and he's asleep, and somehow there's already a cow that he's suckling from.
Audumba.
Yeah. And then he slowly starts having children even while he's still asleep. And he is this chaotic original figure that they kill. Odin, Vili, and Ve, Odin and his two brothers, they kill Ymir, and they start making all of what we recognize of creation out of various parts of his body. They are literally creating the world order that we're familiar with out of this original chaotic giant, who himself is somewhat of a representation of a little bit of order from chaos, where they had nothing but the Ginnunga Gap, ice and fire. Now you have a giant, and he's very chaotic, but that's still a little bit more order than there was. And so we're seeing a progression until we get to humanity creating civilization.
And now there's a few interesting things about this. Ymir, he is, like many of these creation myths, his body is turned into the mountains and the seas and the stars and the sky and all that. What's most his mountains, the mountains are his bones, Sean. So we talk about the bones of the earth. I think that's a phrase used in Ice and Fire. That's where this comes from.
Well,
and most interestingly, mountains. What's that?
The Bones Mountains.
Yes, indeed, the Bones Mountains. And of course, we find a lot of giant bones in the earth, all over Westeros. And we'll talk about the barrows and things. But Ymir, the sky, the dome of the sky, which the ancient man always thought of the sky as a dome with like a hard ceiling. And then there's stuff beyond that, okay? So the dome of the sky is the inside of Ymir's skull. So the gods living in the sky are living inside of Ymir's head, which basically equates the air, the atmosphere that we all live in, that middle realm, is basically like a brain or a mind. So it's getting back to that Norse layer of myth where everything is about psychology. They're saying all of these gods, all of this existence, it's inside the mind of a giant, meaning this is all like, this is you. This is your inner life that we're talking about here. So I thought that was very interesting. The clouds are his brains, Ymir. So now this is, we're skipping ahead a little bit. And by the way, Sean, feel free. Do not feel shackled. We have the characters, all the individual characters at the bottom of the list, but we can skip into any of those characters if it seems like bringing them up is the right thing to do. So don't worry about that. But getting into this, I wanted to talk to you about my friend John Grigsby and his monomyth that he has discovered, the Dragon Slayer sunrise myth. Okay, so I've explained this a couple times, but just in case you haven't heard me say it, basically Grigsby has traced the Dragon Slayer myth of Proto-Indo-European mythology, as well as the Dragon Slayer myths we find in Middle Eastern mythology, back to an older monomyth that's probably around 10,000 years old and probably came somewhere in the region of the Levant. And what this is, it's about the sunrise. It's about the sun splitting the dark horizon in half. And once that horizon is split, the light then seems to create the world. Because before the sun rises, everything is dark. You can't see the difference between the ground and the sky, right? If you're in the country, that is, not you city slickers. Talking about in the country, at night, you can't see the horizon line. And so when the sun rises, it is splitting open this darkness. And then this big dark body, which is conceived as a giant or dragon, from its body parts, the world is created. Some of it becomes the sky and the clouds. Some of it becomes the mountains and rivers and trees. And so this is the creation myth. Now, what I realized is that the Kronos myth this is another version of the same one. Okay, so in the Kronos myth, first we have Ouranos, who represents the dome of the sky, not the atmosphere. Literally, the stone. It was thought of as a stone dome and a ceiling of the sky, lays upon Gaia. So we've got the sky, Ouranos, and Gaia, the earth, and they're laying upon each other. There's no space in between. Sorry to bump the camera here. And so what happens is, in order to create all of Gaia's children remain in her stomach. She can't give birth to them because there's literally nowhere for them to exist. And so that's why she makes the sickle for Cronus. And Cronus then takes the sickle and he severs Ouranos' member. What this is, Sean, it's severing the connection, the sexual connection, if you will, between the dome and the earth. Once that connection is severed, that opens up space in between. Now the gods can be born into that space. And so the reason why he's cutting off his naughty bits is because, again, it is that sort of esoterically sexual joining of ground and sky that leaves no room in between. So we've got to separate them so that there is room. And in Middle Eastern mythology, we see this often as the waters above and the waters below being separated. Because before we create land, it's just the ocean and the sky water. It's like the heavenly ocean. And they've got to be separated. So there's always this separation to create space for things to exist. This is just the sunrise. And the sickle is essentially that swipe of the sickle. That is the line of the sun rising. Well,
and it's fairly telling that basically the Lightbringer myth and Dawn and everything come from that story. So like the idea of, the testicles falling to the earth and then being born from the sea foam is Aphrodite. And she is literally Venus. So she is the morning star. She is the even star. So in the morning star and even star, it's a similar idea to the sun, to day and night. We have all of that coming. And then there's Eos, the dawn, being born from all of that. So it's...
and let's pause on Eos real quick. Fortress of Lu had a really good conceptualization of Eos. She is basically the thing that wakes everyone up. She's like the spirit of waking up, the dawn animating spirit that spreads out, that light of dawn that gives you life in the morning. That is Eos.
The rosy pink fingers of dawn.
And that's why she's associated with spring and Easter, because it's the generative power that she embodies.
I'm going to have to do a video at some point because George is very much hip to that imagery. He loves it. It's a big reason why he has used so much rose symbolism and why he was so happy to tie the series into the War of the Roses. The entire series, such a big theme is the long night, the dawn, and he has tied all of that together with roses, because it is kind of, a rose opening is a type of dawn.
Absolutely. And we've hit that a few times. It's one of the most fun ones to spot, those rosy fingers, and it ties into the bleeding hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So going back to Kronos, he is aided by 4 brothers when he does this chopping, okay? And the 4 brothers represent the 4 cardinal directions. And so this is basically the mapping out of terrestrial space. So before Kronos' genitals are severed and that sky-ground link is severed, there's no space, okay? There's no area. And so the 4 cardinal directions, they pin down Ouranos so that he can be castrated, essentially. And it's Kronos who wields the sickle. Now, what's interesting, and so basically, Kronos is time. And so basically, time and space have created themselves. You see how this works conceptually. And the interesting thing is that the deity that represents the north, the northern pillar, as they say, is called Koios or Polos. And he does represent the celestial axis, and he's associated with the pole star. And so it occurs to me that we basically have Simian star eyes. Okay.
Yes.
Simian star eyes, I've already said, he is the cosmic axis. He's got blue stars for eyes, just like the ice dragon constellation that is George's pole star. Now, he's at the Night Fort, where we have a world tree, the Night Fort Weirwood, and he goes there to see the Hellhounds fight, which means this is the crossing over point. It's the central point between the realms. And Simian Star Eyes, he's got this weapon, right? He's got a long sickle, but it's a double-bladed sickle, so he can chop 2 men at once. And I've always thought, I was like, oh, this spinning double sickle, it sounds like the 2 moons, 2 moon crescents, orbiting around the celestial axis, because, of course, the moons orbit around the Earth. And so what we've got here with Polos, he is the northern pillar, and he is helping hold down Ouranos so that Kronos can chop with a sickle his balls off, right? And so here at the Night Fort, we've got Simian Star Eyes. He's the figure of a pillar. He wields the sickle, and all the people at the Night Fort are symbolically castrated.
Yeah.
Because they can't have children, and Tormund even jokes about that. Oh, did they chop your balls off?
Yeah, there's a huge theme of loss of fertility among the Night's Watch. And it also occurs to me that, looking down at the Hellhounds fighting is like the pole star looking down at Canis Major and Canis Minor.
Oh, yes, it would be. They are right up there in the neighborhood. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jack, we're going to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk right now, apparently, because I just brought it up. And Jack and the Beanstalk turns out to be an old PIE legend. And the myth theme is referred to as the boy stealing the ogre. And ogre and giant are related. We'll go back and cover that. It's in the notes. But the beanstalk, unsurprisingly, also represents the celestial axis or the world tree. Kind of obvious. Okay. It's a big pillar that you climb to the sky. And up there is the realm of the giants, very much like Mount Olympus. And again, being fluid here, Mount Olympus is where the gods live, not the giants. But again, we're talking about, when we say PIE mythology, we're talking about a common myth from 5,000 years ago that goes on to become these different, versions or whatever. So in this version, we have the giants living up in the clouds instead of the gods, but they are beings obviously beyond humanity, and they're up there. And a lot of time, Jack and the Beanstalk is basically an inverted journey to the underworld myth. Usually the trickster gods go to the underworld and they contest with the gods and steal things and bring things back. Sometimes they have to climb up to those. You think of Prometheus. He climbs Mount Olympus, steals fire, brings it back to humanity. Jack is climbing the beanstalk to get the golden goose and other things which equal prosperity and symbolize prosperity, because him and his widowed mother are poor. And originally he traded their last cow The same cow. It's the same cow fertility for the magic beans that then create the beanstalk that lead to the giant. So it's, you see in the Emir myth, we have the Gununga gap and a giant and a cow, and the giant is slain. So here in the Jack and the Beanstalk, the giant is also slain. There's also a cow. Some of the same elements, but just reshuffled. The reason why I was bringing this up just now is because he steals a singing harp. It's the most interesting thing that Jack steals is the harp. And it sings. And it even sings out to the giant, I'm being stolen, when Jack is stealing it. Now, Rhaegar, a trickster hero, steals Lyanna. And he plays the harp. But Lyanna is named after the harp. Lya is the lyre. And in the northern sky, we have Lyra, the constellation, as well as Draco, which is like the ice dragon. So the whole story of Rhaegar and Lyanna is up there in the northern sky. And it occurs to me that Jack and the Beanstalk is too. That's why he's climbing up there and stealing a harp. Right. Because of Lyra.
And he dies fighting a giant.
Yes.
In
some versions.
If we're to... Rhaegar, I mean.
Oh, Rhaegar. So yeah, Rhaegar... Exactly. He's a failed Jack. He could not slay the giant.
Right.
He stole the harp from the giant. He stole Lyanna from Robert, but was not able to slay him because George likes to do that twist in the end.
They put some emphasis at the tourney of Harrenhal about how he made the wolf maid cry and stole her heart with his harp. Yeah. So definitely the same theme. It also
right. Oh, she's crying. She's like the harp, and she's crying out, "I'm being stolen." Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're looking at these things, like Prometheus himself is a Titan, and the act of stealing fire from the gods, fire is very chaotic. That would be something that would be in the realm of a chaotic Titan or giant to bring to man. And man, of course, used it for purposes of civilization, but at its core, it's still a chaotic force. And there's a reason why we talk about it as a theme, as the fire of the gods. So it's, and then we have your tricksters who are just trying to steal riches from up there. It's very, very Robin Hood-like.
Yeah, and gold frequently symbolizes prosperity, the light of the sun that makes things grow, fertility, things like that. And so I mentioned ogres a second ago. So let's go back up here to some of this language.
I think we should real quick just emphasize that the word giant comes from the Greek root from gigantes, which is what the Greeks called their giants, the gigantes. And it's also where the word gigantic comes from.
Yes. Where did I freaking write this down? It should have been right at the top. Sorry, I was kind of going nuts making notes at 4:00 last night.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Google Doc really ballooned up.
I had the note about ogres and how the words are all related. Frick, did I put this?
It's a Germanic root, if I'm not mistaken. Proto-Germanic.
Yes. I guess we'll get to it. I swear I wrote it in here somewhere.
Well, next thing that you get on, I can do a quick look for it. But the idea is that things like ogres and trolls come 100% from this, and cyclops and things like that.
Okay, it's down here. It's under the Wild Man of the Woods section. Okay, So yeah, we'll come back to this, but basically there's a Greek underworld god called Orcus that the word orc and ogre come from. And Orcus is very much a wild man of the woods, which is kind of how George has portrayed his actual giants, as basically hairy men that live out in the woods and are kind of uncivilized. This is an important trope in Germanic mythology that has a lot of overlap with the Green Man. And so that's why I named it Giants, Titans, and what did I call it? Trolls? Did I call it? Trolls, yeah. So basically, orcs and ogres and trolls are all part of the same family, and giants. The sort of Germanic folklore version of the giant. So,
if it's terrifying, if it's ugly, if it's big, it's a giant.
Usually they're ugly, yes. So sometimes giants are like mountains. We said that. They can be like the sea, though, also. And here's a good quote from Tyrion, A Dance with Dragons. Wet winds howled around them, and waves rose like the fists of drowned giants to smash down on their decks. So the ocean titans.
I love it just because in addition to, there are titans of the ocean, there are gods of the ocean, there are we also have to look at the fact that all of the biggest animals live in the ocean. When we talk about the biggest animals, it's like, whales, right? Leviathans. So, I mean, if we're talking about chaotic forces that early man did not understand and was scary as hell, it's in the ocean. It's always in the ocean.
Yeah, and Leviathans, you see like with Tiamat, she's the ocean or she's a sea monster that lives in the ocean. The biggest thing in the ocean is a personification of the ocean itself. Yeah. So we see the giant,
exactly Jormungandr.
Jormungandr with the Leviathans and both the whales called Leviathans and the concept of the Leviathan. So yeah, the giants are in the ocean. Somebody asked, why are trolls associated with bridges? Well, frequently giants are guarding things. And because they represent the boundaries and expanses of the cosmos, when you try to cross over out of the regular world into the other world, you will run into these guardians. Frequently they are giants or trolls, hellhounds. A lot of the wolves and hellhounds in mythology are related to giants. They are the children of giants. Fenrir is a child of Loki, and giantess, right?
Yes. So Angerboda, right? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's the cross. Right, the beanstalk is a vertical bridge. It's a crossing point. That's the thing to think about. Yeah, exactly. Giants are often the elder race. We see that with the Firbolg, with Ymir, with the Fomorians, with the Greek Titans, and with the giants of ice and fire. Sean, will you read this quote?
The history of the Stormlands stretches back to the Dawn Age. Long before the coming of the first men, all Westeros belonged to the elder races, the children of the forest and the giants, and some say the others, the terrifying White Walkers of the Long Night. Gone down into the earth, she answered. Into the stones, into the trees. Before the first men came, all this land that you call Westeros was home to us. Yet even in those days we were few. The gods gave us long lives, but not great numbers, lest we overrun the world as deer will overrun a wood, where there are no wolves to hunt them. That was in the dawn of days, when our sun was rising. Now it sinks, and this is our long dwindling. The giants are almost gone as well, they who were our bane and our brothers. The great lions of the western hills have been slain. The unicorns are all but gone. The mammoths down to a few hundred. The dire wolves will outlast us all, but their time will come as well. In the world that men have made, there is no room for them, or us.
Not so, says Colossal Biosciences. Let's not start that again. But yeah, so you can see the vibes here. The giants are along with the children. They are the old race, the elder race. They are tied to the earth. They live in caves, just like those who sing the song of earth live in the caves, and they're tied to the earth. We don't know, that Bane and our brothers line is very mysterious. I think it suggests some sort of common evolution. Or they could just be referring to the fact that they shared the land with the giants for thousands of years. And so they were neighbors of a sort. Yeah. But yeah, the giants are part of the old races. And that is in keeping with world myth. It's not a profound thing. It's just their nature as, like I said, natural forces, dimensions of the physical space that we exist in. They are primeval. So,
well, and the very important part of that quote was about, how they are not to be increasing in numbers in a big way, because for the same reasons, deer would overrun a wood. The idea is that the deer's numbers will be, pulled by predators, whatever, but there's going to be a balance with nature. And there's going to be a balance with nature with the children of the forest. That's why they exist. With humans, that balance is kind of being upended. And now there is no room for the children of the forest because of it, because they are that personification of nature being first and foremost. When civilization comes, that's no longer the case.
and we see that Garth the Green tried to teach the giants how to farm, and he tried to teach the children. And the children laughed at him, and the giants threw rocks at him, because giants personify mountains, and so they're frequently throwing rocks like landslides. And the giants, they're not civilized. That's what they represent, is uncivilized earth and nature and existence. And so the wild man of the woods, the Wodwos, he is a human that rejects civilization and lives wild amongst nature. And so he becomes giant-like and hairy and monstrous. That's what happens. You don't live, you don't have a razor out there. So everything grows, and
you get some ingrowns here and there, but you deal with it.
Yeah. So so this shows you Garth the Green, he's the first farmer. So he can't teach the giants how to farm. And going back to the bridge crossing, obviously the Freys are like trolls guarding a bridge. And we've talked about Hodor and Walder and the Walder and all that stuff. By the way, I've got a Night Fort video coming, hopefully this week. It's a big video. I'm going to have to get it done, but we'll see. And so we won't go back into the phrase, but they are bridge trolls. And they're tied to the Black Gate via the Walder symbolism. And Hodor is a giant, and the Black Gate is a giant face. Sandok the Shadow is another giant that holds a bridge.
Right. Well, and he's basically playing Sandor, but the phrase I love in Winterfell when we have the two Freys, the big one who's called Little Walder and the small one who's called Big Walder. So, which one's a giant? They're both giants, whatever. And then we have the actual giant Hodor next to them, whose real name is Walder.
It's a riot. It's a total riot. We have our own names at Winterfell. Like Brandon.
And Walder.
And it turns out Walder. Yeah. So now we've also got the Barrow Association. Because they are associated with the earth and hoarding treasure, it's natural that they would be associated with barrows and graves, which often are treasure hoards. And we see this in Ice and Fire. Not only are the giant bones found all over the place, the Barrowlands, the biggest one, is the barrow of the first king, who's supposedly a giant.
And probably Garth. But yeah, the idea is it's very similar to a number of different mythologies. There are obviously, some pulls here from Lord of the Rings and the barrows and the barrow wights with, the tombs of ancient men, and these little people coming through them. Yeah, it's very similar to what George is doing, obviously, but it's doing, Beowulf things because, who guards barrows? Dragons. We have a very similar motif with these green seers being under hollow hills, being essentially dead, growing into the roots of weirwood trees. That's a lot like a tomb.
And we're going to talk about the weirwood giant connection quite a bit. However, just in the same way that a green seer becomes a stag man and puts on antlers by wearing the skin of the tree, and the branches become his antlers and antenna. Green seers become giants when they wear the skin of the tree because they now have a giant face, and the weirwoods are described as giants several times. So,
And they
yes,
get great
a green...
Wi-Fi. And they get great Wi-Fi.
Very good Wi-Fi with all the branches. That is... And they're connected in through the roots, as we know. That's where the real Wi-Fi signal is. But yeah, basically, green seers in a barrow are becoming like giants and like green men by skin changing these giant trees. And then we also see... let's see, what was I going to say about the barrows? No, we already talked about this force of nature. Let's move on. Okay. So... we talked about pretty much all this stuff. What is it about the Cyclopes? They are created very early on and then buried in the earth. What's their deal?
So there are two races of Cyclops. The elder Cyclops were born of Ornos and Gaia, and they were imprisoned in the earth with the Hecatonchiers, which just means 100-handed ones. And that was a big reason Gaia was upset at Oranos and why she helped Kronos kill him and supplant him, because she wanted her children to be free instead of imprisoned in the earth where he put them. So those are the elder
There's
Cyclops.
A lot of lightning associations here. The Cyclopes make Zeus's lightning bolts, and I believe that 100-hand name is about a lightning bolt with all of its branches.
Yeah, so
I think
they throw rocks with each of the 100 hands. Like, that's what they do. And they're terrifying because they can throw rocks. They're an avalanche, essentially. The elder Cyclops, yes, they were famous blacksmiths, and they moved to under the sea to Poseidon's forge. They created the Zeus's lightning bolt. They created Poseidon's trident. They did a lot of important things there. And then later on, Poseidon, after having this association with the elder Cyclops, a lot of his kids with nymphs and things end up as Cyclops.
So the reason why I solved a mystery, I was logged in as myself and not David Lightbringer. That's why it was giving me, it was like, just a reminder, you're a moderator on this channel. And I was like, I know, it's my channel. That's, I'm not sure if that'll reload me. No, this one. I apologize for not being as well organized as I sometimes am. I don't know what I'm apologizing for. Okay, all right. So I think I may have missed a couple super chats. I think that's what I was trying to...
Well, let's take a look.
That's why I was looking at the chat. Okay, so no, fan funding. Here we go. Well, the giants might have skin-changing magic, Kelly. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And I mentioned that in the Bloodraven's Cave video. Thank you, Steve Greenhand. Thank you, Ricky and John. Thank you, Steve Greenhand. And Chuck. This person. Thank you. Welcome to Squisher. Unpronounceable username.
Now, Kelly Johnson, you are talking about the giants from a Song of Ice and Fire, right? You're not talking about, giants from...
Yeah, we're talking about mythology. The giants frequently do have magic and things like that because they are outside of the realms of men, and so they have mysterious powers.
Well, in a very fun kind of detail that we get with Greek giants is, and this goes into what we were talking about with the Chaos Conf and all that, the Greek giants had serpentine legs. Sometimes they literally had scaled legs. Sometimes they had hundreds or thousands of snakes as their legs to carry them up. But the point is you're getting a little bit of Chaos Conf with your giant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's conceptually they are similar to dragons and serpents. Let's see here. So I talked about the Oranos and Kronos stuff. Yep. A couple of more, just going back to Kronos, because this is going to come up later. The reason why Kronos devours all his children is because time devours all. And this is like Kali existing outside of the cycle of time and giving birth to everything, but also devouring everything. Very similar concept, different gender, but same idea. Kronos and Kali both represent time and the cycles of time. And so, yes, they consume everything. Kronos' wife, Rhea, her name probably means flow. Well, we won't emphasize the word discharge, but the point is like the discharging of a river, the flowing of a river, the flowing of time. And so what we see with Rhea and Kronos is very akin to Kali and Shiva, where Shiva represents the stillness and Kali is this animating force that causes cycles of time to emerge from the cosmic void. So similar here with Kronos and Rhea. Rhea means to flow. So she is causing time to flow, causing Kronos to have children. Yes. Now, Rhea has to trick Kronos into not eating Zeus because Kronos is eating all his kids, and we need to have kids. It's very sad. Watch all your kids get eaten by your husband. And so she serves Kronos a stone when it's time to eat Zeus. So, oh, here's baby Zeus, actually a stone. And so he's like a little bit suspicious. He's like, let me see you breastfeed that baby. And she does. And the milk smears across the sky and forms the Milky Way. And then the stone later is placed as the Omphalos stone, which just means the celestial axis again. That's what the navel stone means. It's the point on the earth where the celestial axis, the root of the celestial tree, hits the earth. And so the Milky Way and the cosmic axis being together, this is more setting out the measures of space and time and the dimensions that we exist in. And so Zeus is hidden away. Kronos is eventually forced to disgorge the stone and then his children by Metis. Metis is a goddess who represents magical cunning, deep thought, and skill. Zeus, that's the first wife of Zeus, and that is how they conceive Athena. Athena is all about skill and crafts and things like that. So there's a conceptual relationship here. But essentially, Kronos is forced to disgorge his children. Then we can have the Titanomachy. How do you say it?
Yeah, that's fine. Titanomachy. Or
Titanomachy, there it is. Which is the war between the gods and the Titans. Zeus defeats Kronos. And in some versions, Kronos is just bound in Tartarus. But in other versions, Kronos, different from the other Titans, he becomes the ruler of the Isle of the Blessed, which is just the afterlife. And again, this makes sense. Just as Kali stands outside of time, Kronos is there after our death because he represents time. It's more permanent than us. So,
well, and it's funny because he represents the cycles of time. He also carries a scythe, which is what you reap the harvest with, which is another shout out to the cycle of seasons. And he's
right, because it's time that causes the cycle of seasons to turn.
Right, and then Zeus defeats him, essentially putting a pause on the inevitable march forward of time to have the age of man, basically. So the world that we're familiar with is basically a pause in time while all of the things that we're familiar with, civilization, drop in the water. It's all gone at the end of time. So, it's kind of it gets psychological and it gets philosophical.
Gets philosophical real quick around here. That's for sure. Put me in, coach. I'd play hard for you, Sean.
What?
I'd run 94 feet for you. I'd crash the boards.
I appreciate it because I make them run a lot. They're third graders. They're not always paying attention. There's some nose pickers. So, when they're not paying attention, when they don't run the drills right, they run those 94 feet.
That's right. Sean coaches those third graders hard, folks, because that's what they need.
Yeah, they're little maniacs. They
need some discipline in their life. Sports are good for kids. All right. So, the Jotun. Jotnar. They are esoteric representations of primordial chaos and nature, with their defeat by the gods representing order. We've kind of talked about this. Hopefully you get the conceptual idea here by now. The Jotuns are literally called others to separate them from gods and men, and the realm they inhabit called the other to distinguish from Asgard and Midgard. And what's interesting about that is also we see that in Irish and Welsh folklore. You know, the spirit realm frequently called the other world, the other place. So
Right.
the others live in the frozen dead lands. There it is.
And I always feel like I have to say something every time the name comes up, but Midgard, guard means earth. So it literally means Middle Earth, which is why Tolkien named it that. And I feel like I have to say something every time because it's a little bit clever, but it also makes you roll your eyes.
And so here's more of Sean's disclaimer, delineations, etc., etc. We've already gone over that. Yeah. Jotun are not necessarily tall or large. They frequently are. Again, the idea is power. So depending on the story, they may not necessarily be tall, but they will be powerful. And frequently they are tall because that's an easy way to communicate power. Let's see. Let's talk about the fire giants. The fire giants and frost giants and how they're different. Obviously, ice and fire. But we talk a lot about Surtr around here because he is Jon Snow and Stannis. Almost, he's Azor Ahai, basically. He's the Balrog. He is the inspiration for the red and black color scheme that Tolkien gives the orcs. These are essentially volcanoes. That's what we should think of. The fire giants. We're talking about volcanoes, volcanic mountains. That's why. So the fire giants are frequently coal black. You were saying?
Yeah. Their skin coal black. Well, and when you say coal black, and that's poetic. That's literally from the Poetic and the Prose Edda. What you're talking about is volcanoes again. When it's firing off lava. Like obviously, yes, you get the red, you get the fire. You get the orange-red lava, just like orange-red fire, but you also get ash, and you get, the burned rock, volcanic rock is usually black. So that the black and red fire scheme is volcanoes, it is fire giants, and it is, the Night's Watch, among other things.
The Night's Watch, exactly right. And you see, and spoiler alert, the others are like ice giants. They're like Nephilim. They're like ice giants. They are permanent. They are implacable. They are a personification of the forces of nature. Winter, the most implacable force,
And it shows so much once you kind of see it through this lens. Every scene you see with these people, you see all of it. So like when they're fighting the Whites on the Fist of the First Men, they're on a hill shooting fire arrows out, dressed all in black. They're a volcano. And at the base of the hill, they just found a bunch of obsidian, volcanic glass, So it really in every scene, when they're shooting fire from on top of the impossibly tall wall, Small Paul is a giant and he becomes a white and he's literally encrusted in frost. He's a frost giant.
Oh man, hang on. I just did not wake up early enough to get all cleared out before the... All right, I'm here. Okay, so what's interesting about the Night's Watch living on the wall here is that it's basically... the wall becomes kind of like the Gununga Gap. It's the place where ice and fire meet. It's this place in between the realms. And we see specifically George has merged the wall with the Bifrost Bridge. And the Bifrost Bridge, which realms does it connect, Sean?
Well, all of them, right?
All of them.
It's right. Yeah. Asgard and Midgard specifically, but I mean, it's how you access the world tree and how you navigate essentially.
And so it's a rainbow bridge. That's the easy description of it. and the wall is like a bridge and shines with rainbow crystal light. And so what's going on is that Suther at Ragnarok is going to destroy the Bifrost with his giant flaming sword. And so we see this symbolism being used by George to foreshadow the destruction of the wall. We see Jon defending the wall with his giant flaming sword, which is a little bit of an inversion. So instead of breaking the wall, he's defending it. But Jon is also tied to the destruction of the wall. Every time he looks at it, he thinks about it being the end of the world, and if it should ever fall, it'll be the end of the world. He literally is almost obsessing about the fall of the wall. It's like 15 different times he thinks about it across the books. I counted it one time. And the real kicker comes, of course, in the map scene, right, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, Stannis putting his sword, with Stannis being the guy who wields Lightbringer, a flaming sword, he puts his sword over the wall on the map. So, and that also, it's also a good reference to Heimdall, who uses his sword to let people in and out of the Bifrost. But, yeah, it's...
That's a great one
funny.
because Stannis and Jon are literally like giants. The map becomes the earth, and they are like giants standing over the earth, and then Stannis plunks his sword right down on top of the wall, like Suther striking the Bifrost bridge.
And Jon has a Valyrian steel sword that he got from the previous Lord Commander, and the Lord Commander before that, Bloodraven, also had a Valyrian steel sword. They all have these Valyrian steel swords that are described as smoke dark, which is basically identical to how the fire giants are described. So, they're wielding these, fire magic black swords as they defend the wall. It's combining, both sides of Ragnarok, essentially. Just like, every time George references something, he gets both sides of it. Like when he references Elric of Melniboné, he has the Eldritch Shadow Chaser, but he also has Hirkun, his rival, the opposite, essentially. So he's always putting both in. He puts Frost Giant stuff in Tormund, who we'll talk about later, who's obviously doing Thor stuff as well. But yeah, he's getting both sides of it. And Jon keeps talking about the wall falling specifically as the end of the world. Like the wall is the end of the world, blah, blah, blah.
Right,
so all
like
Ragnarok stuff.
Clearly Ragnarok symbolism. As somebody was saying, B period Frost would be kind of like a bad rapper name.
Yeah? You mean like Brandon Snow? The guy who's going to kill the dragon?
Brandon Snow, B Frost. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. Funny.
I've had that one loaded for a while. I'm glad
well, you fired it at just the right time. Like Luke using the Force, hitting those little air shafts. All right, so thanks, Galen Urso. Appreciate that. And so we've got Nephilim. Let's talk about the Nephilim because we've mentioned the others as giants. We haven't really talked about them yet. So the Nephilim are one of the biggest giant symbolisms that George seems to be using for the others. The key word is Watchers. He uses Watcher twice in the Waymar prologue. The Watchers move forward, 6 Watchers or however it says it. And then, of course, the Weirwoods are also silent Watchers. And so it began. The Green Men keep a silent watch. The Night's Watch is a watch. So George seems to be doing something with this Watcher term. And chiefly that comes from the Nephilim. So why don't you explain who the Nephilim are?
So again, it's hard to completely classify them, but the idea is that there were a number of rebellious angels, and they either intermarried with humans or they just kind of were banished to Earth to become this troublesome race. And they got some stuff done while they were down here. They had a culture and a history, and one of the big things that the Nephilim are associated with was the construction of the Tower of Babel, who we've seen a big parallel in. You've talked about it before with Tower of Babel and the High Tower.
Keep going.
Okay, so anyway, Tower of Babel, it's a huge construction project commissioned by Nimrod, this guy who was rebellious against the gods, who tried to become a god. He wanted to build this huge tower so he could be up as high as God. And he killed, some benevolent giants, including Hake, who was, commissioned to make the Tower of Babel for him.
And this reminds me of other legends or like fake history that emerges with like some of the Celts looking at the old stone circles. They're like, oh, giants must have built these. We see that when later peoples come across ancient ruins that they don't understand. So yeah, the Nephilim must have built the Tower of Babel. But the important thing is that they are fallen angels. Like that really, the others have a lot of fallen angel symbolism. They got the star eyes to tell you that they came from the stars. They're very ghostly, and they are white shadows. So they are like cold angels, essentially.
Right. Well, and it's obviously going to be a huge tie-in to what later became a concept in Christianity, because this is all Old Testament stuff. But later in Christianity, obviously, Lucifer is playing on a lot of the same themes.
Yes, right. The fallen angel who fraternizes with man, and I believe it's it's the Egregori who are the fallen angels. They have children with humans, and those children are the Nephilim. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, usually. I mean, again, there are different versions, and it's somewhat contested, and then you have to look at the context and definition of words, and it's very complicated. But yes, that's how we usually look at it. And frankly, George has always been more concerned with kind of the pop culture interpretation of these things. So when we look at characters like Nimrod, he appears in Dante's Divine Comedy as a giant. Even though he was theoretically, he would just be a man. He's a descendant of Noah. Mm-hmm. But, he's just like the people that he killed. He's in that context. He's always talked about as mighty and tall and blah, blah, blah next to these giants. So, is he a giant? It's hard to tell, but that's how people have interpreted it. So that's how George is going to look at it.
The chat's got a couple good things here. So Bong Full of Snakes pointing out that in Conan, Acheron, which is kind of an Ashai influence, was built by giants. Right. Yeah.
Well, Acheron it's taken straight from Greek mythology. Acheron is one of the rivers of the underworld.
And then somebody had something really funny. Oh yeah, where's that? Bifrost's his debut album is called Crypts of Winterfell, but it's CRIPS.
Look, I have like no style and no flow, but I'm from the West Coast. I can do a sea walk. Just don't ask me to do it.
Dave, Sean, Tim, you've gotten me through more than you understand the past 5 months. Thanks for being there. You're welcome. You're totally welcome. Love those messages. Always happy here to, manage the reality and stuff. So yeah, the like I said, the Watcher term and the star eyes and the angelic nature kind of spells it out. And yeah, they have that sort of presence where they're not entirely of this world. And then we have also the legends about the wildlings laying with the others and siring half-human children. That would be like the Egregori laying with the women, sons of man. We did Jack and the Beanstalk. All right. So let's talk about the big smelly giants in Ice and Fire. They smell bad. It's not a slander. It's just true.
I have almost no sense of smell. I would be the only person safe.
Yeah. Well, none of that comes through the screen. So
no.
I just shaved. I smell good. I smell like aftershave. So
I was going to say, you hiding giants over there with Rhaegar too?
Yeah. People were alluding to Rhaegar's Harrenhal theory. Harrenhal was built by giants because it's big.
Oh, that's the theory. They would think that. The Irish.
Yeah. It's dumb theory. Anyway, will you get into this masterly write-up of the big smelly giants?
Reliable accounts from the Rangers of the Night's Watch, who were the last men to see the giants while they still lived, state that they were covered in a thick fur rather than simply being very large men, as the nursery tales hold. There is considerable evidence of burials among the giants, as recorded in Maester Kennet's Passages of the Dead, a study of the barrow fields and graves and tombs of the North in his time of service at Winterfell. During the long reign of Cregan Stark, from bones that have been found in the north and sent to the Citadel, some maesters estimate that the largest of the giants could reach 14 feet, though others say 12 feet is nearer the truth. The tales of long-dead rangers, written down by maesters of the Watch, all agree that the giants did not make homes or garments, and knew of no better tools or weapons than branches pulled from trees. The giants had no kings and no lords, made no homes save in caverns or beneath tall trees, and they worked neither metal nor fields.
A lot of that is boilerplate, but I just thought we would read it. And then, of course, Jon actually meets them in Storm. And it's a pretty funny scene. And we were right here. Big enough for you. Snowflakes smeckled Tormund's broad face, melting in his hair and beard. The giants swayed slowly atop mammoths as they rode past 2 by 2. Jon Scarin shied, frightened by such strangeness, but whether it was the mammoths or their riders that scared him, it was hard to say. Probably the mammoths. Even Ghost backed off a step, baring his teeth in a silent snarl. The direwolf was big, but the mammoths were a deal bigger, and there were many and more of them. Jon took the horse in hand and held him still, so he could count the giants emerging from the blowing snow and pale mists that swirled along the milkwater. He was well beyond 50 when Tormund said something and he lost the count. There must be hundreds. No matter how many went past, they just seemed to keep coming. In old Nan's stories, giants were outsized men who lived in colossal castles, fought with huge swords, and walked about in boots a boy could hide in. These were something else, more bear-like than human, and as woolly as the mammoths they rode. Seated, it was hard to say how big they truly were. 10 feet tall maybe, or 12, Jon thought. Maybe 14, but no taller. So, pretty much what the maesters were saying, and that's because the maesters' size estimates are based on finding skeletons, so they would be generally correct. Their sloping chests might have passed for those of men, but their arms hung down too far, and their lower torsos looked half again as wide as their upper. So that's a little more ape-like, isn't it?
Yeah. And it makes sense when you're trying to essentially separate them from humanity. Make sure that there are serious differences. Again, that they're not just outsized humans.
Their legs were shorter than their arms, but very thick, and they wore no boots at all. Their feet were broad, splayed things, hard and horny and black. Neckless, their huge, heavy heads thrust forward from beneath their shoulder blades, or between their shoulder blades. And their faces were squashed and brutal. Rats' eyes, no larger than beads, were almost lost within folds of horny flesh, but they snuffed constantly, smelling as much as they saw. Will you pick it up?
Sure. They're not wearing skins, Jon realized. That's hair. Shaggy pelts covered their bodies, thick below the waist, sparser above. The stink that came off them was choking, but perhaps that was the mammoths. And Jormund blew the horn of winter and woke giants from the earth. He looked for great swords 10 feet long, but saw only clubs. Most were just the limbs of dead trees, some still trailing shattered branches. A few had stone balls lashed to the ends to make colossal mauls. The song never says if the horn can put them back to sleep. One of the giants coming up on them looked older than the rest. His pelt was gray and streaked with white, and the mammoth he rode larger than any of the others, was gray and white as well. Tormund shouted something up to him as he passed, harsh clanging words in a tongue that Jon did not comprehend. The giant's lips split apart to reveal a mouth full of huge square teeth, and he made a sound half belch and half rumble. After a moment, Jon realized he was laughing. The mammoth turned its massive head to regard the two of them briefly, one huge tusk passing over the top of Jon's head as the beast lumbered by, leaving huge footprints in the soft mud and fresh snow along the river.
So he's really close. He's like right there. I mean, the thing turned its head and he's like ducking a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the scene in Lord of the Rings where they're in the field with the giant Oliphants and swinging their tusks and trying to get under them.
Yeah, he doesn't have the Legolas training though, so he's just getting out of the way. That's smart.
Yeah, no, Legolas, total child of the forest there.
Very agile, that Legolas.
Hunts with an obsidian bow.
So yeah, he shouted down something in the same coarse tongue that Tormund had used. That's the old tongue. Was that their king? Asked Jon. Giants have no kings, no more than mammoths do, nor snow bears, nor the great whales of the Grey Sea, which are leviathans. So these are all giants here. That was Mag Martun Doeg, Mag the Mighty. You can kneel to him if you like. He won't mind. I know you kneelers' knees must be itching for want of some king to bend to. Watch out he don't step on you, though. Giants have bad eyes. It might be he wouldn't see some little crow all the way down there by his feet. And Jon's like, what did you say to him? Was that the old tongue? And he says, yes. I asked him if that was his father he was forking. They looked so much alike, except his father had a better smell. Just Tormund banter, I guess. And what did he say? Tormund cracked he says, he asked me if that was my daughter riding there beside me with her smooth pink cheeks. So the giants have a sense of humor. Or maybe Tormund's just making this up. I don't know.
He might be. He is a tall talker. But What I love here is they normally call Tormund Giantsbane, right? But here they specifically call him Tormund Thunderfist to draw attention to the storm god, to draw attention to him being, a Thor figure, because he's talking to a big frost giant.
And they're sort of bantering back and forth. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And he's even talking to the giant that is gray streaked with white, as opposed to the ones that maybe look a little bit less like frost giants.
And he makes a "Are you shagging your mammoth?" joke, which is, it's cold in the caves. I don't know. It's lonely. I'm not sure how that works. Anyways.
Yeah. He want to throw stones? Didn't he, a giant?
Oh, we're going to get to that real soon. Yeah. So yeah, we'll leave this here. This turns into Tormund's story, but we want to do a couple other things before we come back to that. So, yeah, because that gets into esoteric weirwood symbolism, and I want to stick with the flesh and blood giants for a minute. So I read this quote in the Blood Raven's Cave. Thank you, Ion. Blood Raven's Cave video. They're all walking through a passage littered with bones. There's giant bones and animal bones and Child of the Forest bones. And then in niches on the side, carved out of the stone, there are these skulls that are placed in these niches. And so they seem to be significant because they're not just on the floor, but they're not on weirwood thrones like an old greenseer would be. So I supposed, if you will, hypothesized that these must be skin changer skulls. They're honored. And there's not too many of them. They're mostly children. There's half a dozen humans and half a dozen giant skulls. And there's a bunch of animal bones, which could be their animals. And so this, for the first time, made me wonder about the idea that giants might be skin changers.
Well, and you have to think, like, why else would they keep the animal bones around? Like, we just read a passage where they talk about how the giants had funeral traditions. So it's, they honor the dead in their own way. If they're doing skin changer stuff, And look at the beginning of the quote we just did, where Jon says he's not wearing skins. But yeah, it's if they're doing skin changer stuff. I mean, we're already very close to our animals. Like we usually, if your pet dies, you honor it in what way you can. But imagine if you were literally sharing skin with your pet. If you had mind in common, absolutely, you're going to do something to try to keep something of them with you to kind of honor that connection you had.
And what I was thinking is that these might have been skin changers and they're animals who perhaps died in a battle, and their bones are brought back to the cave to honor them, and so they're all laid in the same area. Or it could be that, these are skin changers that lived in these caves, and so they're always with their animals. They're always coming back to these caves, and at a certain point, one dies before the other, and their bones are laid to rest in this tunnel here. So it
Right.
could be something like that. And then this is just speculation, of course, but I don't see any reason why giants wouldn't be skin changers. If they're an old race like the children, it's like, why are the children skin changers? They just are. That's their power. They're elves. So the giants may have that power intrinsically. They may not need to have crossbred with green men or something like that.
Well,
However, go ahead.
sorry, and one thing that I've kind of looked at it in the reverse, just because of the relationship that Bran and Hodor have. That at some point, maybe the children of the forest, that the abomination that they did was skin changing giants. Like they are simpler people in the way that Hodor is a little bit simpler. But they do have their own intelligence. But however it shakes out, the idea that there is skin changer magic, that it may be somewhat perverted here, however it works, there is something going on with giants. They are magical in some way.
I think Eldrick Stoneskin is a strong believer in children skin changing giants.
You know me, I don't like to say anything with any surety. Like I don't want to pin to anything that hasn't been proven, but it is something that I consider. I consider both sides of that, where the giants are skin changers or they're getting skin changed by the children. Both as like one of them has to be happening at least. So
One or both, yeah, one or both could be happening.
our Bane
And
and their
and
brothers.
it's this question of evolution. Like we said, these giants are hairy and kind of ape-like, and they got the square teeth. It sound a little bit like the brindled men. The brindled men have the same square teeth because they're also mostly vegetarians, essentially. That's what that means. And but the giants sometimes, eat human flesh. That's a big part of giant folklore. And then the brindled men are supposedly ghouls who eat the dead and eat people. And so, yeah, then we've got, of course, the hairy men. So go ahead and read this quote about the hairy men of Essos.
Andalos stretched from the Axe to what is now the Bravosian coastlines, and south as far as the flatlands and the Velvet Hills. The Andals brought iron weapons with them and suits of iron plates, against which the tribes that inhabited those lands could do little. One such tribe was the Hairy Men. Their name is lost, but they are still remembered in certain Pentoshi histories. The Pentoshi believe them to be akin to the men of Ib, and the histories of the Citadel largely agree, though some argue that the Hairy Men settled Ib and others that the Hairy Men came first from Ib.
And so this is expanded upon in these other two quotes. Tales are told of the hairy men, a race of shaggy, savage warriors who rode to battle on unicorns. Though larger than the Ibanese of the present, they may well have been their forebears. So the unicorns are a big clue because we know they have these unicorn goats, quote unquote, on Skagos. So obviously there is a connection. Now, it may be that the connection is tens of thousands of years old. The hairy men, like the giants and the children, are probably older than humans, evolutionarily speaking. And so it could be that Hairy men riding, unicorn goats is something that was spread all over northern Essos and northern Westeros. And the Ibbenese and the Skygosi are better thought of as surviving pockets. It's not that necessarily Ibbenese came to Skagos, although that is obviously possible. That's what is suggested. I'm pointing out that they could just be sister, populations, remnant
They're Bane and their
populations.
brothers.
Was that
They're Bane and their brothers.
something like that? And their cousins, yes. And
Well,
then, of course, Huzor Amai of the Sarnori, he wore a pelt of a king of the hairy men. I wanted to include that, Sean, because you pointed out that the giants have pelts. They're not just
yeah.
skins, they're pelts, and the hairy men do too. So there's clearly some connection between the hairy men and the giants, and also the Skygosi. And so this could be an evolutionary tree kind of a thing, and there could be some interbreeding. We know that with human evolution, obviously, we interbred with Neanderthals as well as having a common ancestor with Neanderthals. So it's
Right.
probably
Well,
something like that.
and I love that quote because first of all, he's wearing the pelt of a king, the hairy man. He's wearing the skin of a hairy man. He's skin changing a hairy man. And then you bring up Skagos. I love that you brought up Skagos because just like you were saying with the giants, there are rumors and talk about the Skygosi being cannibals, like eating man flesh.
Yes. Same set of ideas, isn't it? Go ahead, in fact, and read this quote here. And if I don't get back from the restroom by the time you get to the bottom of the page, then extemporize.
I will sing show tunes. All right. The men of Ib have not always confined themselves to their islands. There is abundant evidence of Ibbenese settlements on the Axe, on the Lorathi Isles, and along the shores of the Bitterweed Bay and the Bay of Tusks in the west, and Leviathan Sound and Thousand Islands in the east. And history tells of several Ibbenese attempts to seize control of the mouth of the Sarn, attempts that brought the hairy men into bloody conflict with the Sarnori sister cities, Saith and Saris. The god kings of Ib, before their fall, did succeed in conquering and colonizing a huge swath of northern Essos immediately south of Ib itself, a densely wooded region that had formerly been the home of a small, shy forest folk. So once again, we're seeing the big hairy men kind of fighting with the Ifakevron, who are either children of the forest or related to them. So some say that the Ibbenese extinguished this gentle race, while others believe they went into hiding into the deeper woods or fled to other lands. The
So
Skygosi, who were
this could be an echo of the way that the children and the giants are said to have warred against each other in Westeros, right?
that's what I was just saying right as
Okay.
you were sitting down.
Perfect. On the same page.
Yeah.
Great minds. And you can see. Oh, and this one's got the good quote here. The Skygosi who reside there are little regarded by other Northmen, who consider them no better than wildlings and call them skags. The Skygosi call themselves the Stoneborn, more giant stone giant symbolism, and we'll go back for the Jogwin. But all the giants, again, not all, but many associated with stone. Trolls turn to stone, or sometimes transform from stone. It's all the same set of ideas. So Skygosi are the Stoneborn. That's more of a giant connection. And Skagos means stone in the old tongue. A huge, hairy, foul-smelling folk. Some maesters believe the Skygosi to have a strong admixture of Ibbenese blood. Others suggest they may be descended from giants. And what we're saying is that there must be an entire through line between all three, clad in skins and furs on untanned hides, is said to ride on unicorns. The Skygosi are the subject of many a dark rumor. Human sacrifice to the weirwoods, and they're cannibals. Yeah, so.
Well, and we love that they call themselves the Stoneborn. It means stone. That sounds a lot like Earthborn, And of course, we have the stone giants. And giants, literally, the original definition was earthborn. Gigantes means earthborn because the giants were born from Gaia, the Earth Mother. So, them being stoneborn, it's a call out that you've talked about before. Obviously, there's a lot of Mithras symbolism there, but there's also a lot of giant symbolism here. And of course, they're the ones who are rumored to be eating man flesh, riding unicorns who sound a lot more like rhinos, that kind of stuff. It all sounds like giant stuff.
It's all drawn from giant folklore. And that's why we went over the giant folklore before we started the stream, so that as we went through all the ice and fire stuff, we'd be able to easily point it out and be like, look, more giant folklore. And so we have, along the same lines, the Jogwen. They are from the Bones Mountains. Remember, Ymir's bones became the mountains. And so in the Bones Mountains, we have giants. They are called the Jogwen. They are stone giants, said to be twice as large as the giants of Westeros. I've pointed out that doesn't necessarily mean twice as tall. If they're twice as massive, they'd only actually be a few feet taller and a couple feet wider. They'd end up weighing twice as much. So,
well, they get poetic with these kinds of things. Like when it's twice as big, it just means it's a lot bigger.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Reeling me back.
I was measuring.
I was talking about midichlorians and stuff.
Yeah.
And so they disappeared. They were defeated by Garrick Squint-Eye, a Jatar of the Jogosnai, who slew the last of the stone giants at the battle in the Howling Hills. The point is they come from the northern bones, the snow-covered part of the bones. They're the snowy stone giants. So it's just more Jotun.
And I don't want to go into all of it because Garak is it's a mythological reference, but it's also a Conan reference. But the idea of Squint-Eye, it's implying Odin. So we're having Odin slay the giants here again.
A war leader. Odin is a war leader. That's his role. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay.
I gotta go to
that makes a lot of sense. And so part of the reason why I've brought up all these hairy men is because it helps us link the green men to all of this. Obviously, there's still a mystery about what the green men are. House of the Dragon showed us a green man, which is another point in favor that they actually do exist. There's Cernunnos-like stagmen in Ice and Fire on the Isle of Faces. Now, Garth Greenhair, he is said to, he's a hairy fellow. And the thing is, all of the green men from folklore, they are hairy too. Think of Pan, Dionysius. They're part goat. They got hairy goat legs, and Garth, again, called Garth Greenhair. And oh, what's this? It's a link to our bonfire store where you can buy a smoking green man shirt. Oh my gosh. The link is in the description. Sorry for being cheeky there. That was just to remind me to say something. Now, we talked about there's a clue that Garth is a giant because the barrow of the first king, and Garth is the first king, is said to be a giant's grave. Interestingly, Garth the Green also was said to have fathered a child on a giantess who was John the Oak, a huge man, 8 feet tall, or maybe 10, or maybe 12. So he's associated with oak trees, and he's a giant. The oak and his descendants are the Oakhearts of Old Oak. And we meet an Oakheart, looks like a very normal person, not a giant. But we do know that somehow giants and humans interbred. It may have been through the hairy men as a medium, but the fact that we have Hodor and all these people that are huge, I'm pretty sure we're supposed to think that they do in fact have a little bit of giant's blood. And so here we have a green man interbreeding with a giant. And this is kind of what I was saying, is that maybe the giants we see up north are like de-evolved green men or share a common ancestor with the green men. And this would help explain why they are the brothers of the children of the forest and why giants might be skin changers if they are sort of related to the green men or have interbred with the green men. And that's what is implied right here. So,
Yeah, and I mean another thing that you talked about before, and I don't know if you maybe mentioned this while I was in the bathroom, but is the idea of evolving from them, like them having a common ancestor. Like there is some relation. In a vacuum, you don't just accidentally get multiple humanoid species. Like the odds of that
Right.
are insane. So, and I didn't measure I didn't take, their midichlorian count or anything, but if we're doing pseudoscience here, there's a relation.
That's why I was saying we don't know if humans really did intermarry with giants or if it was hairy men that humans bred with, because the hairy men were big. They are more closely related to giants, obviously, than the humans are. So if a human intermarried with a hairy man or a hairy woman, then
Well,
that would give you giant human offspring that were more hirsutes, if you will. And so we've already talked about the Germanic Woad-Woes. Like I said, this is a version of the Green Man with really an emphasis on wildness, untamed wildness, somebody who's gone to nature. And we frequently see these characters. Sometimes they are a permanent wild man, but sometimes we see a civilized person become a wild man for a time. And this was Merlin. I found this. Sean, you're probably familiar with this. But in Joffrey of Monmouth, he is adapting a Welsh myth of Merddin Wilt, part of the contributing inspiration for the Merlin mythology. And I'll just read this. A strange madness came upon him. He crept away. This is after a battle where he saw his friend slain. He crept away and fled to the woods, unwilling that any should see his going. In the forest he went, glad to lie hidden beneath the ash trees. He watched the wild creatures grazing on the pasture of the glades. Sometimes he would follow them, sometimes pass them in his course. He made use of the roots of plants and grasses, of fruit from the trees, and of the blackberries in the thicket. He became a man of the woods, as if dedicated to the woods. So for a whole summer he stayed hidden in the woods, discovered by none, forgetful of himself and of his own, lurking like a wild thing. And we see this elsewhere in folklore too. A king is cursed, loses their memory, goes and becomes wild. So yeah,
well, in Merlin, obviously there's some influence there from Mirrodin Wilt, but however you pronounce that. But Merlin itself pretty easily translates to wood sea, with Merd being a classic Latin root word for sea, and Lin being a classic root word for wood. And the idea is when there were giant forests and much bigger woods back before humans were cutting them down and civilizing the world and blah blah blah, they used to call them that. Like when you had a great forest, it was a sea of wood. So he is a green man in every sense of the word. Early iterations of him had him very druidic, which is kind of what we're seeing here with the shamanic madness of the woods. And later on, he became more of what we look at as like a sorcerer. But earlier iterations of Merlin, like he did the King Under the Mountain thing, except he would do it in an oak tree. Just
interesting.
hide and hibernate in an oak tree until England needs him again.
Which is a motif we see all over PIE mythology, essentially.
Right.
But yeah, where do you think he got all that sorceress knowledge from? You know, like Odin,
Well,
you have to go and get it from these creatures that are beyond mortal existence. So other examples of the wild man, Slushy Lesh will be happy to hear me say that the Leshy of Slavic folklore is a version of this. And we've seen, like I mentioned, Pan and Sylvanus, Silenus, also Enkidu from the Gilgamesh story, as well as Grendel. So will you say a word about Enkidu and Grendel?
I will. I'm working on a Gilgamesh video, and Enkidu is kind of the. You talked about the king losing his mind and going into the woods and becoming a wild man. that's kind of what is going on in the story of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh is doing a bunch of things like basically he's doing prima nocta, or what they call first night in A Song of Ice and Fire, and a bunch of other things that are pissing the people off. They pray to the gods that, somebody will straighten him out. And the gods send this wild man who is the only one strong enough to oppose Gilgamesh. And he's living wild in the woods. He's friends with animals and blah, blah, blah. Then he has a remarkable week with a courtesan who civilizes him over the course of a week with her sex. And
let me just cut in and say, that's often a motif with the hairy man. There's some woman who might be able to civilize him or might try to civilize him.
Right. Well, it works. He becomes civilized immediately to the point that animals no longer want to hang out with him, and he's very sad. And then he hears about all the bad things that Gilgamesh is doing, and he goes and confronts him, and they wrestle, and it's very homoerotic. And eventually they respect each other so much and their strength and courage and blah, 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 that they just become best friends, and they're inseparable after that. So it's kind of like reconciling the wild part of his own personality.
I can hear the best friend montage music right now in my ears. It sounds like Cheers or some sort of 70s thing. I don't know. Anyway.
My best friend.
Da, 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 da. Okay, so that's Enkidu. And then as far as Grendel is more of an oppositional figure.
Right. Grendel, and you'll see this in my Beowulf video, but Grendel is very much he's outside of society. He's rebelling against society, and he very specifically is mentioned to descend from the biblical Cain. And I don't want to go too much into it, but he is also, they talk about how he's descended from giants or trolls. He is a troll, blah, blah, blah. And again, the specifics do not matter. It's not important to classify him. The point is that he's exemplifying this kind of natural force against civilization and against, the society that they've created.
And he's got to be subdued.
Right. Well, and it's funny because Beowulf insults a guy by calling him a kinslayer and referring to this rumor that he killed his brother. And the idea is Cain is the original brother killing kinslayer. So he's basically calling him Grendel or Cain, essentially. But anyway, that's why we talk about Melis the Monstrous. He's a Grendel figure. He killed his brother in the womb, for one, so he's doing the kinslayer thing. He also killed his Blackfire rival, doing more kinslayer stuff. And obviously, he's very monstrous in a number of ways.
And he's also huge.
Yes, and he's from outside of Westeros, so he is outside their society. So it's he's doing a lot of that.
And he's killed trying to cross over into Westeros, almost like an inverse of the giant guardian that the hero has to outwit to cross over. Yeah.
Well, and what I love is that, so he's supposed to be the end of the male Blackfire line, whereas Grendel dies, and he's basically succeeded. The entire next act in Beowulf is about Grendel's mother. And with the Blackfires, the big theories surrounding it is that Fagon and the Blackfires continued through the female line. So it's kind of like a shout out to Grendel's mother.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Now, we just mentioned all this stuff about the hairy man of the woods, wild man of the woods, and stuff like this. The Green Knight, by the way, also a version of this. He literally comes out of the woods and causes chaos and then disappears again. And then to go find him, you have to cross all these thresholds, to the other world and stuff like that. So without getting into that, he also is in that category. So George has a pretty good shout out to both the Green Man and the Wild Man of the Woods being grouped together here. And I call these weird totems. These are the decapitated Night's Watch heads placed on ash tree spears. So the ash tree gives us, or the ash wood spears, but they give us the symbolic ash tree Yggdrasil. And then the heads are like weir faces because they are bleeding and carved. So that's the idea. Now, check out this quote. So the spears were 8 feet long and made of ash. So shout out Sleipnir and all the eights, you know. The one on the left had a slight crook, but the other two were smooth and straight. At the top of each was impaled a severed head. Their beards were full of ice, and the falling snow had given them white hoods. Where their eyes had been, only empty sockets remained, black and bloody holes that stared down in silent accusation. So they're white like the weirwoods. They're covered in snow, but their faces are white. You know, the head's white, beard is white. Then we got these carved holes that are eyes. So very weirwood-like. Who were they? Blackjack Bulwer, Harry Hal, and Garth Greyfeather. So Harry Hal is your wild man of the woods. Garth Greyfeather, obviously Garth is a green man, but here there's a death symbolism because of the gray feather, right?
In the north, yeah.
And then same with Blackjack Bulwer. The Jack in the green is a figure associated with returning this green to spring, so he's a kind of a green man figure, but this is a blackjack. And then of course Bulwer brings in the bull association, sacrificial animal, but also sort of the demonic horns. And House Bulwer, red and black, also in Ice and Fire. So,
and to connect that to a real world history, that was a practice of the Anglo-Saxons to mark their graveyards with spears with skulls on top of them. And it was very much for the reasons that you were talking about. It represented, you know, first off, the world tree. They were ash spears. So it was very much the world tree with this skull on it showing, you know, marking the edge of the graveyard. The idea is you have to travel on the world tree, the form of transportation, to get to the underworld, right? So that was a tradition that they had. It's in Beowulf. Grendel's mother marks the edge of her domain with the head of the guy that she killed in the hall, named Aesir, which just means ash tree.
So you can see what I love about this is how well George understands the concepts behind all of this mythology. He's not just putting little shout outs to it. Like, he has a deep understanding of why skulls are mounted on ash spears. It's to symbolize them journeying to the other world, to the afterlife through Yggdrasil. And so here we have weirwood symbolism. That's why I call them weirwood totems. What is this telling us? It's telling us that the people inside the weirwood tree are people that are blackjacks, hairy hals, and garths, meaning green men, horned lords, wild men of the woods. So either human green seers or green men human hybrids. Any of those things could qualify, but that's who's in the weirwood net. That's who died to become the weirwood trees. Horned lords, green men types. And so George is showing you that the hairy man of the woods is in this group. It's like he can be a bull man or a green, stag man, or he could just be a hairy man of the woods. Same thing. So,
well, he's taken a lot of influence too from Tolkien here. I don't know if you remember Gone Berry Gone and the Green Men in Tolkien. They were the Wodes.
So I had that in here, actually.
You did. That's why I brought it up.
Okay, yeah, the Druidane.
Up a little bit, you actually wrote out the Wodes.
Yeah, well, Wodes is the German name. And so Tolkien created wild men called the Druidane. And in his world, he's sort of joking that, like, oh, this is the inspiration for the Wodes mythology.
Right. But he also has a group of people who kind of help out the Rohirrim on the way to fight in Gondor, called the Wodes, and they have like a chieftain named Gonbury Gon. It's a whole thing. But
I think those are the Druidane. I think that's the same thing.
Yeah. There's a. I don't want to get too much into their history or anything, but that basically yes.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, and this is, I don't know where George's love of mythology began, But certainly he's looking at Tolkien and seeing Tolkien's mastery of mythological knowledge and being inspired and going, oh, this is the way, So, and the same thing for Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. He's using mythical archetypes in the same way. What's his name? Stephen Baxter?
Tad Williams.
Tad Williams. Stephen Baxter's different author.
Yeah.
Also good
George,
author.
George definitely also got a lot of mythology from Marvel Comics. He was a huge fan when he was little. The first thing that was ever published under his name, George Martin, was a letter he wrote to the editor because he was upset about a Captain America storyline when he was like 10 years old.
Yeah. And there's a straight line between that and him complaining about Maelor Targaryen on House of the Dragon. I would submit. Oh, boy. We are who we are, aren't we, Sean?
Yeah. We're all just following George, trying to find all his Horcruxes.
And we've already talked about King Robert, but he's both a green man and a giant and a Thor figure. There's a lot going on with Robert. He's such a mishmash. Let's just keep moving. Let's talk about the weirwoods, Sean. I want to get to this and some of the people. And so the weirwood giants, serve up these two quotes for me, would you?
Sure. He remembered their godswood, the tall sentinels armored in their gray-green needles, the great oaks, the hawthorn and ash and soldier pines, and at the center, the heart tree standing like some pale giant frozen in time. The heart tree stood before him, a pale giant with a carved face and leaves like bloody hands.
And so, he said it twice. It's a pale giant, and specifically a pale giant frozen in time. So, you start wondering, how literal is this? Is there some part of the weirwood tree that is a person frozen in time? Well, the green seers arguably are merging with the weirwood tree and starting to share its timeless existence. So they are people being frozen in time. But we really wonder about like the original weirwood trees, which may have had the green leaves. And probably the first green seers were the green men before any humans were green seeing. So I'm beginning to think about this original setup of the green man and the weirwood tree. Is it like a mech suit? Like is the green man does the trunk just open up and he just steps in? Or
yeah, it's the Iron Man Mach 2. But it's in a big way they've kind of equated these hollow hills that the weirwoods are on, that their roots are in, that the green seers, get under in approximation of tombs. But the idea is like, we have these knights, these tree knights, these tree warriors, right? Turning the trees into warriors against the first men is the operative quote. But they also, whenever we see them played, we see both associations. Like the Brotherhood Without Banners are playing green men and Night's Watchmen, and they are the Knights of the Hollow Hill. It's the same thing. The hill is the tree is the hill, because essentially this big, morbid, white tree frozen in time, it's a frost giant. So it's representing a mountain, it's representing an esoteric concept, it's representing a tree that's kind of like the world tree. It's all of those things, and somebody is inside it trying to puppeteer it, and that's kind of a bastardization of what it's meant for.
That kind of reminds me of how the entire physical reality is made from Ymir, and how the gods are living inside of Ymir's head.
Mm-hmm. Rent-free.
Yeah. It's pretty similar. So then we have this other language, of course, about giants awaking in the earth, which seems to apply to earthquakes, but could have to do with weirwoods. So, for example, of course, the Hammer of the Waters, I think it was a moon meteor. We all know that. But the story that we have associates it with earthquakes. And so the description of it is that giants awoke in the earth. And supposedly the Green Seers did this. And this is the one other way you could make the arm of Dorne makes sense is if the weirwood roots go all the way down into the core of the earth, then potentially somebody with control over the weirwoods could make an earthquake, right? And this is related to the Horn of Winter. Jormungand blew the Horn of Winter, woke giants from the earth, and this can supposedly bring down the wall. Well, we know at the Night Fort there is a big weirwood organism under the wall. And there may be more. So this could be literal, where the weirwoods can literally like shake the wall down. Or more likely it's talking about the magical wards in the wall that are powered by the weirwood magic. So there is some connection here with the idea of giants waking in the earth and the weirwoods. It certainly would appear that way. And there's another clue about this in this A Dance with Dragons Asha chapter, or in this quote from Asha's chapter, which Sean will read because I'm feeling tongue-tied.
Sure. The crofters' village stood between two lakes, the larger dotted with small wooded islands that punched up through the ice like the frozen fists of some drowned giant. From one such island rose a weirwood gnarled and ancient, its bole and branches white as the surrounding snows. 8 days ago, Asha had walked out with Ali Mormont to have a closer look at its slitted red eyes and bloody mouth. It is only sap, she'd told herself, the red sap that flows inside these weirwoods. But her eyes were unconvinced. Seeing was believing, and what they saw was frozen blood.
So we've got a giant under the water, and his punching fist is the island that has the weirwood tree on it. And the weirwood tree itself looks like a rising fist as well, as we've discussed. It looks like the mushroom cloud and the rising fist. And then we see that the weirwood is frozen, just like the frozen fists of the giant. So there's, Sean, you're apt in saying that the weirwood tree is like a frozen ice giant. Like that is exactly what George is saying in this quote here.
It's so heavy-handed once you're looking for it, and the frozen fists of some drowned giant. And the funny thing is like if you're completely covered in snow, like they're talking about, that's kind of like being drowned. You're surrounded by water, blah blah blah, can't breathe, and then they're as white as the snows around it. They're calling it snow or frost, essentially. Again, just calling it a frost giant.
Right. And so with the pale frost giant frozen in time. So the Black Gate also could be a person that merged with the weirwood organism to become that face. And if it's not, it's at least a giant face made of a tree. So it's something like that. This is some sort of giant guardian of a crossing point, and it's also a tree. So we just continue to wonder, like, is there a way that people or giants or green men can turn into the weirwood trees in some sense? And then we have this angry oak that the wildlings carved just north of Molestown, south of the wall. They came upon the third watcher. There's a watcher language again. Carved into the huge oak that marked the village perimeter, its deep eyes fixed upon the King's Road. That is not a friendly face, Jon Snow reflected. The faces the first men and the children of the forest had carved into the weirwoods in eons past had stern or savage visages more often than not. But the great oak looked especially angry, as if it were about to tear its roots from the earth and come roaring after them. Its wounds are as fresh as the wounds of the men who carved it.
The whole Watcher thing, they do so well with that, especially we talked about earlier, the Nephilim being one of the influences for the others and being called Watchers. We talk about Argus from Greek mythology, who is a giant called the Watcher because he has 100 eyes. So like children of the forest looking up through tree eyes, through a Watcher is the imagery that we're getting here. And I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil the video you're working on. But this weirwood organism underneath the wall, the spirit of the wall, this person, it's like Atlas, who is a Titan, but also called a giant, holding up the wall, holding up this responsibility. And he's even got, a bunch of sentinels or watchers watching out for him through the wall.
Yeah, and when Bloodraven says I've watched you with 1,000 eyes in one, he's talking about watching through the weirwood net. Like those are the 1,000 eyes. So if we're thinking about the weirwoods as giants, it's very close to Argus Panoptes and his 1,000 eyes. The many-eyed giant. Yeah, absolutely. And then we see also the anger, the emotion of it. Remember I was talking about the giants represent the emotions that are chaotic and angry and stuff. And so here we see, this is an especially angry giant. And it's crossed over with the oak tree. So again, we go back to Garth siring John the Oak on a giantess. And as well as the fact that, and this is getting muddy, but the storm gods are always associated with oaks too. And George has made his storm god characters giants, like Robert.
Right. Thor's sacred tree is an oak because he's a summer king, and oak is the tree of the summer king. It's why they call him Thorin Oakenshield in The Hobbit.
And the same for Zeus.
Yeah.
Dunk we're going to talk about Dunk. He's a tree warrior giant character heavily associated with oak. He has an oak shield, says oak and iron, guard me well. And
They use what were the lances made out of? The wooden tourney lances. Were they oak?
I don't remember. I think they might have been
oaken finger.
Well, he has the wooden finger, but I'm not sure if what wood it is. But let's do Tormund, because Tormund is really apparent. You made the point that the hill and the tree are similar, and so Tormund could mean a few things, but one way you can translate it is hill mouth. Okay, so hill mouth, and then the other one is Tor from Thor.
Right, and Mund is just the word for mound. Monde in French means world. Like the idea is, Thor mound. So like the burial mound of Thor, essentially. So this is like a macabre version of Thor, who's kind of also like a frost giant. And we see that a lot with him. But, in operative scenes, they use his different titles. So like, Thor Tormund Thunderfist. That's very much, Thunderfist is a title of Thor. Giantsbane is a title of Thor. So these, all of these titles are telling us things, about, George's world, but they're also referencing older mythologies.
And so Tormund can laugh the snow off the mountaintops like a frost giant. He, see some of his other titles, Breaker of Ice, Mead King of Ruddy Hall, that's a reference to Thor and the Mead of Poetry. And
Breaker of Ice, a real reverse Titanic there.
Father of Hosts. I'm not sure where that title comes from. Oh, I guess that means host, like the battle host.
Yeah, so it would be like an Odin thing more than a Thor thing there, but it's a similar idea.
Okay, so let's go back to the Kindle.
Mead King of Ruddy Hall is also more of an Odin title than a Thor title, but
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be. Odin is the one who steals the mead of poetry.
Yeah, and he has Valhalla, the hall, the hall of the fallen.
So John asks Tormund after they see all these giants, "Is it true you killed a giant once?" Ghost lopes silently beside them, leaving paw prints in the new fallen snow. "Now why would you doubt a mighty man like me? It was winter and I was half a boy, and stupid the way boys are. I went too far and my horse died, and then a storm caught me. A true storm, not no little dusting such as this. Ha ha. I knew I'd freeze to death before it broke, so I found me a sleeping giant, cut open her belly, and crawled up right inside her. Kept me warm enough, she did, but the stink near did for me. The worst thing was, she woke up when the spring come and took me for her babe. Suckled me for 3 whole moons before I could get away. Ha ha. There's times I miss the taste of giant's milk, though. So what do you make of that?
Well, I make a few things. First off, he's very much doing Empire Strikes Back here, where you cut open the tauntaun to stay warm. But he's also doing birth symbolism. Like he ran back into the womb. He's and then if she gave birth to him symbolically here, well, now she's suckling him. So for 3 moons, it's implying, the 3 moon meteor births that come down. So again, we're seeing the story in miniature.
And here the giantess is also, it's kind of like the Kronos principle, where Kronos is eating children that are then reborn from him.
Yeah.
So there's some sort of rebirth from a giant principle going on here. Kronos is a Titan, remember? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it could be, so if the giant, we've just been talking about weirwood giants. So I was thinking about the giantess potentially as a weirwood. She's cut open so he can get inside, just as the weirwoods are carved, okay, and the people go inside. And she's talking about the giant's milk, so that makes you think of the weirwood paste. And he's in there through the winter. So this is a green seer that's hooking up to the weirwoods during the long night, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And then there's another story on the next page. Husband to bears, father to hosts. Why don't you read this one starting with, well, here's a tale for you.
Okay. Are all crows so curious? Asked Tormund. Well, here's a tale for you. It were another winter, colder even than the one I spent inside that giant, and snowing day and night, snowflakes as big as your head. Not these little things. It snowed so hard the whole village was half buried. I was in me ruddy hall, with only a cask of mead to keep me company and nothing to do but drink it. The more I drank, the more I got to thinking about this woman lived close by. A fine, strong woman with the biggest pair of teeth you ever saw. She had a temper on her, that one, but oh, she could be warm too. And in the deep of winter, a man needs his warmth. The more I drank, the more I thought about her, and the more I thought, the harder me member got, till I couldn't suffer it no more. Fool that I was, I bundled myself up in furs from head to heels, wrapped a winding wool around my face, and set off to find her. The snow was coming down so hard I got turned around once or twice, and the wind blew right through me and froze me bones. But finally I come on her, all bundled up like I was. The woman had terrible temper, and she put up quite the fight when I laid hands on her. It was all I could do to carry her home and get her out of them furs. But when I did, oh, she was hotter even than I remembered, and we had a fine old time. And then I went to sleep. Next morning, when I woke, the snow had stopped and the sun was shining, but I was in no fit state to enjoy it. All ripped and torn I was, and half me member bit right off, and there on me floor was a she-bear's pelt. And soon enough, the free folk were telling tales of this bald bear seen in the woods, with the queerest pair of cubs behind her. He slapped a meaty thigh. Would that I could find her again. She was so fine to lay with, that bear. Never was a woman gave me such a fight, nor such strong sons neither.
What could you do if you did find her? Jon asked, smiling. You said she bit your member off.
Only half, and half me member is twice as long as any other man's. Now as to you, is it true they cut your members off when they take you for the wall?
So that's That's the thing I was alluding to with the Night's Watch castration symbolism. They're infertile because they're not allowed to take wives or whatever, but there it's made more literal. So
Yeah.
well read, Sean. Thank you. Appreciate that. And okay. So first of all, consent, boys and girls, is appropriate. Second of all, don't mess around with bears. Remember the bear guy? He's dead now, eaten by bears, predictably. So leave
Cocaine
bears
bear.
alone.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
the snow
now,
was poetic.
so yes, exactly. This is well, there is a theory that this is about Tormund and a Mormont woman.
We don't know who their parents are, and they kind of just accept the fact that, these ladies are the ladies of the house. There's no man of the house.
So yeah, I think you can try to figure out which one it is because the Mormont daughters look very different from one another. So there might be a clue about which one could be Tormund's. But I wasn't really prepared to go into that. I apologize. I don't have them all their descriptions. But obviously this could be a tall tale version of Tormund getting strong, not sons, but daughters perhaps, from a Mormont woman, the she-bear.
But either way, there's a lot of skin changing motifs here. There's also there's a story about a king and a bear, and I can't remember too much about it. They actually riffed on it pretty hard in the TV show Disenchanted, but it's definitely a folkloric theme. Basically, it's kind of the thing that you were talking about. The king goes back into the wild, kind of loses himself for a while, goes back into the wild, becomes a wild man, and then eventually comes back out.
And so if we're continuing with the idea that Tormund means hill mouth, and so this is all about going into the weirwoods and into the weirwood caves and stuff, the hollow hills, then with this story, the bear is the weirwood tree. The big clue is that the bear gets skinned. First of all, the bear is the giant. It's taking the place of the giantess here, which was the weirwood last time. So this bear becomes bald and is skinned. And that's what the weirwood tree looks like. Blood and bone with a bleeding face, as if its skin has been stripped off.
Yeah, it's also kind of like, you shave a giant, now they're, bald and blah, blah, blah. They're starting to look like just a big human.
And I keep saying hill, but the idea of mund meaning world even works better. It means more like the world tree, like the mouth of the world.
Well, that's one of the names for it. Axis Mundi is the world axis. So
right. So he's Tormundi.
And this
with many X's.
I didn't quite see it. I think somebody pointed it out in the chat, but in this story with Tormund, the bear is the maiden fair. It's kind of like a split personality woman. 1 minute she's a woman, 1 minute she's a bear. She is the bear and the maiden fair.
True. That's what he's saying. And never such a fine woman as that bear. That is funny. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
A bear all covered with hair. This is a bear that lost its pelt. So in any case, the point is, this is the story of essentially a green seer wedding the weirwood tree. Remember, it's a wedding, and so the weirwood tree is given a fight. So this is probably about Azor Ahai R-wording the weirwood net, essentially, if you will.
Right.
Skinning it, forcing his way in, and losing his fertility in the process. That all checks out.
Well, and something that, we talked about on both the God and the Goddess stream is that these are esoteric concepts bumping up against each other. We don't want to get hung up on things like the R word. This is not literally a sexual assault. It's the union of two things, which sometimes, like we talked about earlier, sometimes they're opposites. Sometimes they don't necessarily go together on a macro level, but in certain ways, when they create a union, you start to see other concepts in nature. So the union has to happen, even if it's, sometimes a violent union. It requires a, very violent storm god, because storms are violent. So, when we look at this, and when we look at the Azor Ahai story, when we see it, we shouldn't be thinking sexual assault. We shouldn't be thinking, he's murdering his wife. That's on a macro level. That's the symbolism of these concepts that he's trying to relate. And when we look at it, he said something in that quote where, God, I can't remember what it was, but it was basically like, it's not literal. Let's go back a little bit further. It might have been the previous quote. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was the previous quote. I never did. If she nursed you, you couldn't have killed her. I never did. But see, you don't go spreading that about. The Azor Ahai never murdered Nissa, but don't go spreading that about.
Well, so okay, I was gonna say that the idea that some of these stories involve this lack of consent and this violation has raised the idea that could be the way it happened with the Weirwood Net, that Azor Ahai, as you say, invading. And we see a lot of that person with like Waymar, without fear, invading the woods when all the woods is like, you should stay out of here, man. He's like, nope, going on forward. That seems to be one version of the story. But then in the legend, Nissa is like, yeah. And remember, Nissa is the child of the forest. So the real meaning here is that Azor Ahai is gaining access to the magic of Lightbringer, meaning the magic of the Weirwood Net, the fire of the gods, through Nissa. Nissa, as we suspect, probably a child of the forest, so that makes sense. But she's giving permission in the myth. She's sacrificing herself to create this magic that he can wield. So it could be that it was a dark deed that had to be done for some reason. Azor Ahai had to become a green seer because the Weirwood Net was already cursed or messed up or something. And so that was the only way to do it. Like, there's so many different versions of the story. I was going to say, I do think it is important that some of them are an assault. That suggests that could be how it is on the Weirwood Net. But you're also right to point out that, like, when we're talking about sex and it translates into the realm of symbolism, it's like what I was saying about Eros being this thing that makes two opposite principles have communion. It's sex right. Used as a metaphor.
Right. Well, so there's this quote, and I think it's from the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and it's the best possible quote for exactly what we talk about with esoterica. When they are meeting that woman who turns out to be Calypso, the goddess. I don't know if you remember the movie, but they're talking about whether the woman that he fell in love with was as wild as and unchangeable as the sea, or whether she was the sea itself, or blah, blah, blah. And she goes, all different versions, and they are all true.
Right. Yes. Because it's conceptual. It's just different ways of talking about concepts. So one's just as good as the other, potentially. So we will close the stream here by going through some of these characters. We've already mentioned a lot of them. But we will go into some of them that we haven't talked about as much and talk about how they function as giants in the story. And we'll kind of do this a little bit lightning round style. We'll take longer on some of these, but some will go quick. So Dunk is a giant hedge knight. A hedge knight is already a tree warrior because a hedge is a little tree. It's a bush. And they're called that because they sleep under the hedges, and the green seers sleep under the trees. So,
right.
He has an oaken shield, like we said. It has a tree on it, an elm tree. And Sean, you were pointing out that expresses the summer-winter dichotomy because oak is a summer tree and elm is a winter-associated tree. So that's showing the both sides of it. And his oaken iron shield goes with the mantra, oaken iron guard me well, or else I'm dead and doomed to hell. So it's the shield becomes a door that like keeps him out of hell, or if it gives way, it'll send him into hell. So you think about the Weirwood door and just the concept of these doors to the other world.
And inside his shield is that elm tree, which is, a winter tree, but specifically an underworld tree. So he's dead and doomed to hell inside the oak and iron prison that is his shield. Anyway, yeah, I love it a lot. I also love that they open Duncan Egg where he's burying Sir God, what's
Sir
his name?
Arlen.
Sir Arlen, burying him in a hill.
Arlen of Pennytree, indeed. And Arlen, I wonder if that's related to like Arston and Aslan.
It means oath keeper, which is I think why he picked it. Just they're like, I don't want to go into your entire collected works, but oath keeper as the idea of the comet returning and all of that symbolism with him having a winged chalice. Yeah.
Well, and of course, Brienne finds that shield and is a Dunk descendant and wields Oathkeeper. So it's the same idea carrying through there.
Right. And an oath keeping and like a pact, the pact keepers, the Sacred Order of Green Men, the taking of the Night's Watch oaths, like these are all ways of looking at a union where now the Night's Watch is fighting with the Children of the Forest, the Sacred Order of Green Men fighting with the Children of the Forest.
And then he blew a horn blast that set all the dogs to barking.
Yeah. Sorry, that's Rick. He's a big boy and he's hungry. But
feel free to go feed him if you need to.
Will do. But yeah, it's the union is also sexual. When we talk about like Nissa being a child of the forest and Azor Ahai being like a dragon-blooded man, when you cross those magical bloodlines, the pact, the oath, it's also a marriage pact. It's a union, however you look at it.
What kind of dog?
He's a red-boned coonhound, like in Where the Red Fern Grows.
So a giant dog. And
he's 130 pounds. He's a big fella. All right, I'm gonna feed him.
Yeah, you go do that. Don't let those giants get hungry. So the giant hedge knight, he's also got a long wooden finger. So he's a tree knight in a lot of ways. He's also got the gallows knight sigil, which refers to Odin, but that's Odin hanging on Odin's tree and merging with his tree, which is the model for the Green Seer. So he's a tree knight in every sense, and then he's using his lance, which he thinks of as his long wooden finger, to touch Arian's dragon. And that's interesting because it sort of parallels the Night Fort, where we have the Weirwood reaching out for the moon. Dragons come from the moon. The dragon sigil is moon-shaped. It's in a circle. And so we've got a tree warrior with a wooden finger trying to pluck the dragon out of the sky. And he eventually does. He smashes all of Arian's dragons out of the sky. Arian is whirling the triple morning star as well in that scene. So it is tons of trees pulling the stars out of the sky, symbolism going on. And then we've got some of Dunk's descendants are obviously giant figures like Sandor. He is a Cerberus with giant dog, essentially, a guardian of the crossing. But he's also plays the giant protector role to Sansa and Arya, and also kind of to Joffrey. He's also very powerful. We see him, the battle forms around him until he runs away. And then we've got Gregor. He's a really obvious giant figure called the Mountain That Rides, and he is symbolized to the giant's lance. So he fights somebody called Hugh of the Vale at the tournament in a Game of Thrones, and Hugh of the Vale represents the Vale itself. He's dressed in the hues of the Vale, meaning the colors of the Vale. He's a bastard from the Vale, so he doesn't have a house name. So he's just Hugh of the Vale, but his name is a wordplay on the color of the Vale. So he represents the Vale, meaning the mountain, or the Vale itself, rather. And then we have the Mountain That Rides, embedding the point of his lance in Hugh of the Vale. So the mountain, called the Giant's Lance, is embedded in the Vale itself. It's a mountain of dark stone sitting in the middle of the Vale. So it's when Gregor embeds his lance into Hugh. It's just copying the layout of the mountain. And so that means, yeah, that makes Gregor both a giant and a big frosty mountain, which just kind of makes the point of everything we've been talking about today. And so I will not belabor that point. I will move on. But there you have it. Odin has a giant build a wall for him, but didn't pay him, and then uses Loki to distract him from having to finish on time. And of course, this is probably where George got the idea to say that Bran the Builder had giants help him build the wall, correct?
Yes. And
then he screwed the giants and left them all on the north side when they put the last brick in. He's like, ha ha, can't pay you. You're on the wrong side.
Well, and Odin screwed it, so he refuses to pay him. And so kind of like, well, I won't get into it, but basically they had an ironclad contract, so if you don't finish in time, we're not paying you, right? So he has Loki distract him, and Loki decides to distract him by getting his horse all riled up. Loki turns into a female horse, has sex with this guy's horse, and gives birth to Sleipnir, Odin's mount, who is also kind of a metaphor for the world tree itself. And then Thor kills the giant.
Yeah, the gods are not the most honorable necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give points to Loki, though. That's
he's a real chaos agent. You never know what he'll think of, to get the job done.
Hey, do what you love. You'll never work a day. And he's the hardest working person in that story.
Like, Loki, can you distract the giant? Maybe you could do a little dance or something. He's like, oh no, I got something. Don't worry.
Yeah. It's like kind of like that. There's a good meme about Judas in the Bible where, it's like, hey, we need you to tell us which one Jesus is. He goes, he's the one that I'm going to kiss. And he starts putting on lipstick. You could just point to him. Don't tell me how to do my job.
Right. I've got a plan. Don't worry. So, I was thinking that, Loras pulls a trick involving the horses and involving getting the horses riled up, actually.
That's why I put that there.
Okay. So, I put this here and you put this here. So that was...
No, I wrote that down.
So that was our teamwork. And so what Loras is doing is he's using the horny horses to distract the giant and win the match. And this is kind of my point about how you can't... a lot of times that's how you have to defeat the giants. You have to trick them. And so that is exactly what he does. Yeah.
Well, it's also funny because Loras is from a house that has a lot of parallels to Tyr, who is one of the gods in that story, who, they're not, as you mentioned, acting in the most honorable way. But
Tyr.
Gotcha. Tyr. Yeah.
So, and then Gregor also, of course, he gets turned into Ungregor. He becomes, an other. A lot of these giants are Kingsguard, which just sort of cinches the others as giants thing. But Gregor in particular becomes a dead giant, and again, like the mountain itself, Bran's vision of the giant looming over everybody like a mountain is essentially a headless Gregor. So
black blood. But another kind of parallel to that story is that so Tyr was best friends with Fenris, and so he's the one who puts his hand in his mouth as like assurance that they're not going to bind Fenris. Then they bind Fenris, he chomps the hand off. When the mountain gets all pissed off about the distraction, it is Sandor, the Hound, who defends him.
Oh, right. Interesting. There it is. And then so we got Hodor, another Dunk descendant. He carries around anvils and branvils, if you will. But much like Atlas, he's carrying, world anvil on his back, if you will. And then he's opening the door from the crypts, which is something no one else can do. So it's a giant strength that's used to cross this threshold. And he becomes a walking king of winter, as we know, with his frozen beard and ice eyes. And of course, the kings of winter themselves are stone giants down in the crypts. And so we have more stone giant symbolism.
Right. That was one of your earliest podcasts, is when you were talking about Hodor and his frost beard wielding the, decrepit stone or sword of the King of Winter, looking like a stone statue. Yeah, it was all very on the nose.
Which I meant to stop and say and speculate wildly a minute ago when we were talking about, well, in old Nan stories, the giants lived in castles and they were big men with big swords. Shouldn't there be some layer of truth to that? Martin never has anything that's just made up. Like, are we talking about green men or the first humans that were like recently interbred with green men and so they were taller? And is that why Martin has all these great swords running around so prominently, these giant swords that are like too big?
Well, and something that we talked about as, dragons basically being the same motif. George is using them, whether it's, the Chaos Conf, serpent, dragon, whatever. They're also giants. They're also leviathans. And so when we see, one end of the spectrum is the werewood magic. The other end of the spectrum is dragon stuff going on. So we have these dragon riding people with Valyrian steel swords that sound like fire giants. So it's giant stuff all the way down. And yes, these giant people, these dragon people, they live in castles that are, godlike. And they are godlike, closer to gods than men, is what they said about the Valyrians. So it's all very on the nose.
There's a couple more legends about giants and castles. I've got them down here.
Well, one I like is, you mentioned it earlier, was John the Oak, right? Fathered on a giantess. And then we see it kind of, that as the genesis of the game, Come Into My Castle.
How so? Explain.
So, well, they said something about that in the text, about how, like, that was the idea of Come Into My Castle was invented because of that, where he had giants working on it. But then we see it when that giant tries to get through during the battle at the wall, and he's killed by the blacksmith, right? The one-armed blacksmith.
Yes.
Trying to get through the oak and iron wall, and it's they're playing Come Into My Castle with giants, just like at the.
Is Donald Noy? Donald Noy is a Thor figure, isn't he? Donald is like Donner, like a thunder figure, and he's a smith. Right. So that is Thor versus the giants there, isn't it?
So yeah, to a point. And I mean, he's from Storm's End. He made the Warhammer of Robert Baratheon, so there are endless connections there.
Okay. Interesting. So Servant of the Mirror Shield, he saved Princess Darissa from giants. So where was she? Why were, the giants that we see in the north aren't holding princesses captive. This sounds more like the giants that live in castles. And there's this story from Old Nan about a hero without a name. This is Arya remembering a story Old Nan had told once about a man imprisoned in a dark castle by evil giants. He was very brave and smart, and he tricked the giants and escaped. Because, again, tricked them and escaped. That's what you got to do. But no sooner was he outside the castle than the others took him and drank his hot blood. Wah, wah. So, is that... First of all, it's a little Jack and the Beanstalk, hiding in the castle, escaping the castle of the giants, but then eaten by other giants, the others. So I've always thought about this as the last hero, potentially. The Dark Castle could be Moat Cailin or the Night Fort, and he is obviously killed by the others. We think the last hero was ultimately resurrected. So he may have been killed by the others first.
Right. They killed him long ago. But yeah, I mean, wherever these very different non-frost giants were keeping Princess Peach, um, I would rather be held hostage by anthropomorphic giants than have to deal with the others.
And so these are the tales that we're talking about, where giants live in castles and they're like big men with swords. So
Mm-hmm.
hard to say. I think these might be some mangled memory of first man life, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm really trying to say. But that it may have something to do with green men intermarrying with, first men.
Well, now I like the whole you brought up in that outline is Argoth Stoneskin, and I think he's very much a mountain parallel. Um, and he's upset because he gets his supposed wife stolen by an Azor Ahai figure. What's his name? Uther of the High Tower.
Uh-huh.
And then we have the Mountain, who scales the walls of a castle, the Red Keep, to steal a princess and do pretty horrible things. Basically, what Argoth Stoneskin would be doing if he could.
I see.
And yeah, and Argoth is a reference to Argus, among other things. Argus is a giant and the Watcher who serves Hera.
And it makes Uthor the trickster figure who stole something from the giant as well.
Right. And in this situation, that trickster figure would be Rhaegar, who we've already very much associated with a trickster. He plays a harp, just like, Jack and the Beanstalk steals the harp and he steals the woman, and yeah.
Donal is a Gaelic name meaning ruler or leader. A lot of names mean that. A lot of names. So House Umber is interesting. They're all huge. Their sigil is a giant in broken chains, which speaks of waking giants in the earth, obviously. And then we notice that the children's tower at Moat Cailin is where the Umbers take up residence. So we see their sigil flying on the children's tower. And of course, that's tied to the legend of the Hammer of the Waters again. So some sort of link between wakened giants in the earth and earthquakes that's being implied again and again. And then I'll also point out that umber is an earth-colored pigment. So these are, again, earth giants, earth-born people.
Also the name of my best friend growing up. But yeah, it's good. Sorry, on a couple of levels here, I totally lost my train of thought. I had something good to contribute. This is my
I was just saying that they're earth-born because they're earth-colored, and it implies waking giants in the earth because they have a giant in chains on the sigil, and their house means earth. So, yeah,
it's also a reference to a state in not a state, but a region in England, Northumbria, North Umber. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Yeah. And then, of course, we talked about the Baratheons, but Robert specifically said to look like a giant when he puts on his antlered helm. And he has a giant's strength, too, says Ned. And nobody can really lift his hammer. Ned can barely lift it, so that's Mjolnir-esque, like Thor's hammer. And then Robert also comes down from the Vale like a mountain giant to begin the war.
I don't think Robert would let Ned lift his hammer as much as Ned wants to.
Oh, he would. He wants Ned to hold his hammer.
I feel like it was one way. He's a maiden's fantasy.
He's trying to show him Ned two-handed grip like this. I think they practiced together. I think they got it. So Ned says he could barely lift it. That means he tried. You know what I mean? So
oh my God,
the Night's
Robert,
Watch must have like a maiden's fantasy.
Big.
Ned's words.
Your hammer's so big.
So we talked about the Night's Watch as fire giants already. You did all of this. Yes, we did. And on the Night's Watch are some giants, such as Gren. He's thick as a castle wall, so he may be a dunkling, as well as Small Paul. They both get that description. They are both huge and strong. Gren wields a torch against the other with Sam, and Small Paul carries Sam when he can't walk, but then turns into an ice white. So he becomes a frost giant. And the line, I grabbed the quote, Sean, because it's very, well, it's mythical. It blows up the scale to Titanic level. The world shrank to 2 blue stars, a terrible crushing pain, and a cold so fierce that his tears froze over his eyes. So it's a cosmic battle with this ice giant. And then that also makes you think of, again, Simeon Star Eyes as the pillar, the Axis pillar with his star eyes. And so, yeah.
And I love that scene so much for so many reasons. One, it's like, obviously, Small Paul dies, right? But right before that, he was carrying Sam, who's like a dead man walking, making him a pallbearer. But it's also like at the end of Lord of the Rings. At the end of Lord of the Rings, Samwise picks up Frodo because he can't walk anymore and carries him up the mountain. And this is the reverse. Samwell is getting carried because he can't walk anymore.
George loves his remix.
Yeah.
And then Lemon Cloak, he's wearing the Sandor Clegane helm, already a giant and a hellhound. I'm not sure what the meaning of them all training the helm around is exactly. I guess it's like anyone can become the monster or something.
I suppose, but we have 3 owners of a dog helm. It just gives me 3 heads of Cerberus vibes.
Oh, right, because there's 3 of them. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Rorge has it as well.
Yeah.
And Greenbeard, he's a Garth type giant. He turns into Greybeard when he doesn't diet, so it's just showing you the cycle. He always.
Sea.
What's that?
He also comes from across the sea.
Right. Like the Titan. And like someone coming from the Green Sea. He's even bigger than Lem. And he is very lusty. He bangs the innkeep every time they come by, right?
Oh, yeah. They talk about how lusty he is because they have to.
It's the rules. So Raleigh Duckfield is a dunk parallel, and he's serving Fagon instead of egg. What does he do? What's a prominent scene with him? I can't even think of one really.
They go into his bio a little bit, and he was serving the Caswells, and it's kind of a direct parallel to Dunk again, because in Dunk we met, I want to say Joffrey Caswell, who's a terrible jouster, and it's an embarrassing scene because Kyle the cat loses to him on purpose, and then because he lost to such a bad jouster, he wouldn't bring him into his service. But Kyle the cat made his first sword, right? If you remember that, yeah. So Raleigh Duckfield is a blacksmith's apprentice, and for his 16th name day, his father made for him a sword, and the Caswell heir, the son of the Lord Caswell at the time, said, "You're just a blacksmith's apprentice. You don't get to have like blah, blah, blah." And he stole it from him. So Raleigh Duckfield broke both his arms and fled to Essos. So it's a little different twist on a very similar tale. A trash Caswell heir who's acting like a little jerk. And this guy does not behave very Dunk-like.
Breaking somebody's arms is definitely an act of a giant, though.
Yeah.
And then there's Left and Right, who guard Queen of Thorns. Not much to say about them, but they're 7 feet tall. They're giants. So they're kind of like trees. She becomes an elf queen between 2 trees, I guess.
She also says they don't speak, which again sounds like, silent giants,
Victarion. He's thick as a castle wall. It's not described that way. He just is thick. Yeah. I joke that he's unstoppable because he's got the bull rush. But he is kind of like a chaos giant. If you think about the Ironborn and his presence in the story, he is implacable and strong, and he is also a chaos agent. So,
well, in bleeding into Makoro here, Makoro's the one who fixes his hand with fire magic. So he has this blackened, fiery hand, and so he's a fire giant, and so is Makoro, who has dark skin that they call teak, and like basically describe the same way that they describe Valyrian steel, the black, almost black of Valyrian steel. And so it's again, we're looking at a fire giant, obviously a guy who is the same color as a fire giant and has fire magic at his disposal and all of this. Yeah, it's on the nose. He survives in the ocean impossible amount of time.
Yeah, right. The ocean is a realm of the Titans, and Makoro can come in and out of it. So that shows his mastery or synthesis with it. And then he's also an oracle. That Koios, the northern pillar, he's the grandson of Apollo, and he is associated with oracles. Giants are often associated with oracles until in the future, and Makoro is as well. And Makoro also inspires terror of the mind in the same way that many giants do. Like specifically, everyone is just really terrified of him on the ship.
Right. Well, and he gives Victarion the Dusky Woman, right? Essentially. So in Dusky, when we talk about dusk, that's when the even star comes out, and that's when the day dies and turns into night. So a lot of similar themes.
And then Drogo, we've talked about, no, I guess we haven't mentioned Drogo. He gives a lion pelt to Daenerys like Heracles given the Nemean lion pelt.
Yes. And Heracles is very much associate. First of all, he's described as gigantic all the time. He's described as larger than any human, blah, blah, blah. He's instrumental in the Gigantomachy. He's mentioned more than any of the gods are, actually, in the Gigantomachy. He killed half of the major giants in the Gigantomachy. So he's associated with giants for the same reason, and he's kind of like a giant himself. He gives the Nemean lion pelt to a woman, and he and of course Drogo gives the white lion pelt to Daenerys. We see a lot of fire association with Drogo, especially through Drogon, but he's burned in a pyre. He melts gold and burns Viserys to death. So we're seeing a lot of fire giant stuff from him.
And then, like many of the characters that play the roles of the heavenly bodies, they're riding on horses so that they're up in the air. And he's got a sun face, obviously, so he is up in the air. And then he's cut down, or he falls off his horse. That's like the sun falling out of the sky. We also see Drogo lets his opponents cut him like Belwas, so it's just sort of like he's acting as though he's indestructible.
Yeah.
And then what did you have to say about Miro? Obviously, the Titan of Bravos is a giant and a last hero figure marching out of the sea with the broken sword and all that. What do you make of... I guess Miro plays the role of the last hero against Barristan, right?
Well, and you talk about the Titan of Bravos, which is very obviously, the Colossus at Rhodes. The Colossus of Rhodes was Helios, a sun god. So this is more of like George melting in his inverted, dark solar king figure with fire giants. And, the Titan of Bravos will come and defend Bravos with fire and sword. And so Miro, the Titan's bastard, rides a horse up to try to kill Daenerys. He actually plays a very similar role to Drogo. It's like he's the bad version of Azor Ahai in Daenerys's kind of soap opera. But yeah, and then he gets pulled down from his horse by the surf, by all these freedmen who kill him.
And so he is murdered also by an entire crowd of people, which is kind of makes you think of like a giant falling to earth, and it takes like hundreds of people all attacking him at once.
Right, like the ants getting on the but also when you talk about the deaths of these major giants, usually there is a crowd. When you talk about the castration and murder of Ornos, how many people were there? Like it was Kronos, you had the four cardinal directions, Iapetus, Krios, all that. And then you had Gaia there, and like basically everybody who was not shoved inside of Gaia, locked inside the earth, was there. So it was like a crowd of people killing Ornos.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea with a very generous super chat. My partner and I have watched and rewatched your videos for the past few years. Thank you for making such in-depth, well-researched, and respectful content. Consider this back pay. Hey, no problem. Happy to be of service, and thank you.
That's very nice.
Much appreciated. And I love what I do. So, thanks for supporting. We're 3 hours deep into talking about giant mythology. So this is definitely what I like to do.
Yeah.
So you were talking Bronze Jan Royce is a giant. He's as tall as Sandor. He's got gnarled hands like a tree. He's got the runic bronze armor, which obviously sort of ties him directly to Norse myth. And he is a mountain king, another mountain king. And he's also Bronze Jan, so he's earth colored as well.
Yeah, and they talk about one thing that we talked about with these giants is that usually they are older. They're like an older generation. They're from the earth. They're earthborn. Like they existed before these more modern civilized concepts existed. So they're an older generation. And we have Bronze Jan Royce. He's an older fella, but they talk about how those strong hands look like they could still crush younger men.
And that's, that crushing is a big part of giants. They're always crushing people. And George even uses that metaphor of a giant's fist when people are gripped by fear or panic.
Ooh, Ned better watch out. If he can't lift that warhammer, he's going to get the giant's fist.
I thought you were getting excited because this tied back to the idea of the giants representing mental confusion and fear and things like that.
I am, but it's also good. It's good like mountains crushing things, like an avalanche coming down, like the rocks of an avalanche, big boulders being the giant's fist. And we see in a number of places, especially in Greek mythology, we see like Enceladus is one of the major giants in the Gigantomachy, and he's literally crushed beneath Mount Etna. And then we have other giants, Otis and Ephialtes. They try to assault Olympus by stacking mountains on top of each other. So these, them being the esoteric concept of mountains, it makes a lot more sense when you look at it that way.
So then we have Archibald Ironwood. He's he's huge, first of all, 6.5 feet. He carries a big warhammer. But he's named after the ironwood tree, Jarnvidr, in Norse mythology. And that's an ancient forest home to giants and trolls and wolves who will eat the sun and moon at Ragnarok. Angerbotha and Loki live there, and all the wolves live there. It has to do with eclipses. There's some cool astronomy tied into all that. And then it's like, so for example, George has the wolf's wood. And the trees of the wolf's wood appear to be attacking the moon in one scene. So we think of Skoll and Hati, the wolves that eat the sun and moon, but it's a wood that's doing it. So the wolf's wood is like the I guess it'd be Jarnvidr. It'd be like that. This wolf forest from which come the monsters that eat the sun and moon.
And it is also a Tolkien reference. It's always a Tolkien reference because the other translation of Jarnvidr is as Mirkwood.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And they've got the spiders in Mirkwood. Let's see.
Well,
Okay.
They get chased in by the wargs.
Right. And so this is the reason why trolls ride wolves, is because of this association between giants and the wolves and the Jotun, with the trolls being a version of the giants. So that is where that warg mythology comes from originally. You'll notice the orcs riding the wolves in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
But then I was thinking about Archibald and that name Archibald. Like, think of a bald head and the arch of his head. It reminds me of Ymir's head that we all live inside. So
I didn't think of that. That's good. Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, this is all locations in the Norse cosmos because he's a giant. Ironwood is part of the giant realm, and then yeah, Ymir's head. So
Hellholt is also interrelated. Hell is one of the underworlds in Norse mythology, and Holt means forest, so it's like the forest of hell. It's a thing in Norse mythology.
so you put Magor on here and then didn't put any bullet points. So I sat here and thought about it. No, I take that back. You it looked like there weren't any. The page break was weird.
Oh, I added them later. Yeah,
Oh, you added them later.
I
Okay,
really think about it.
it
But
was
yeah,
blank.
like yeah,
But I was
um,
I came up with some stuff though. I was thinking about him and I was like, okay, he's like an evil giant that became king. So that made me think of Balor of the Evil Eye, who is his eye is a withering eye that causes blight, and Magor causes the whole realm to blight, like a Fisher King, like an evil Fisher King. His death on the throne is a bit Kronos-like because he's spread out and cut. He also has the lack of fertility. He also sort of consumes his own children because they're all dead. All his children die on birth. So yeah, because the throne is cutting him while he's spread out, and then yeah, he sires monsters like a titan, and then he's got the fire giant symbolism of Balerion and Blackfire.
right. And I mean, this is more of the fire giant bleeding into the inverted solar king. You mentioned Balor of the Evil Eye or Balor. I've been pronouncing it wrong for sure. But yeah, Balor of the Evil Eye, who is definitely doing a lot of fire giant things in that he wields fire and he is giant, but he's everything bad about the sun. And George has kind of combined these motifs, whether you're talking about the Titan of Bravos, which is based on the Colossus of Rhodes. The Colossus of Rhodes is a giant statue of Helios, a sun god. So everything we look at here, it's about sun gods. What happens to sun gods when they go bad, or what is the macabre version of a sun god? It's an inverted sun god. It's like a black hole almost, and he's bled that together with the idea of these fire giants of Suder and the giants of Muspelheim.
And so yeah, everything about Magor is essentially yeah turning the world dark in every thematic way. The other thing I noticed is that his death kind of creates the realm. Like after he dies, Jaehaerys and Alysanne create what really is the Seven Kingdoms. So in that sense, like Ymir, he's a giant who's killed in order to sort of create a realm. Oh, it is 420 in California. Look at that. We talked about Meles the Monstrous. Melisandre, you mentioned her as a female fire giant with the black blood. I was thinking that Ashai is very Muspelheim-like, isn't it?
Very much. It's ruined. It's burned out. The magical curse is kind of just a George extension of that. But yeah, she's a mother of monsters. I think you put that bullet point. I didn't.
I did.
But yeah, she's 6 foot tall, very tall for a woman. But specifically, they talk about how much taller she is all the time than these members of the Night's Watch, than these wildlings, like towering over them, etc. Her shadow baby rises taller than Davos and then towers over the room. And yeah, so it's. God, I tore up my voice doing the Tormund. You
Yeah,
got me
me
mute
too.
and cough here.
Yeah, the sacrifices we make. So Lucas Inchfield, the long inch, he's almost as tall as Dunk. Um, the giant Lucas Longinch did not daunt him half so much as the prospect of facing the Red Widow. So again, yeah, daunting. And the Red Widow being like Melisandre, even more terrifying. Melisandre also inspiring fear and terror.
And the
Like a
fiery
giant.
hair and blah blah blah. And something that you've mentioned a lot is that cold moat it's everybody in there, all the knights of Cold Moat, it's all very othery. And in Cold Moat sounds like, frozen water. There's a lot of wall symbolism in Cold Moat, including the fact that it was, previously ruled by a more classic Sun King figure. It used to be ruled by the Checky Lion. So it's now frozen. So, and frozen in time in the way that a werewood would be, or a frost giant would be. And
the sigil is a spider on a web that essentially looks like a weirwood face almost. Yeah.
Right. And the werewood net is a web in a manner of speaking. So Lucas Longinch is like the foremost of the frost giants at Cold Moat. And they, in the color descriptions of him, he sounds like that.
And let's see here. What else about Lucas Longinch? Oh, they battle in the river too. So they're battling over the crossing. It's cool. It's like, yeah, two giants fighting.
A river frozen in time. Yeah.
And we talked about Sutor. Oh, yeah. Read this Tyrion quote and explain while I worship our Lord.
Oh, I think that Lord Tyrion is quite a large man, Maester Aemon said from the far end of the table. He spoke softly, yet the high officers of the Night's Watch all fell quiet, the better to hear what the ancient had to say. I think he is a giant come among us, here at the end of the world. And this is one of many quotes where they refer to the wall as the end of the world, or the edge of the wall being the edge of the world. And the end of the world is Ragnarok. So when we look at scenes like a scene you've dissected a lot as being like a Ragnarok scene and a fire giant scene, is when Stannis puts his sword, a fiery sword that is very much in the style of like the weapon of a fire giant, across the wall on the map. So it's like,
and it's also kind of saying that like Ragnarok is going to happen here, right?
Yes. And that is how Sutor ends the world. He gets the fiery sword of Frey, Summerbrander, and he has all the power to burn down creation, essentially. So laying a fiery sword, just like the fiery sword Summerbrander, on the place they keep calling the end of the world it's like, calling home run when you step up to bat.
And then I was also thinking of the fact that like the confrontation with the others that will be like Ragnarok literally will happen at the wall. So not only will the wall fall at the end of the world, it's the location of Ragnarok as well. So,
and they had a battle with the wildlings, who very much represent the others, who brought a bunch of giants with them, a bunch of frost giants, essentially. They're all frozen, wearing skins out there, and they're assaulting an icy wall. That sounds like frost giant stuff. It sounds like the frost giants trying to get inside the wall of Asgard.
More or less. Yeah, which would be bad. You wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
So, the other thing about Tyrion, he's got the Fafnir dragon symbolism. He's from a cave full of gold, and he is either part Targaryen or dragon-like. And of course, Fafnir was he a dwarf or a man first?
He was a dwarf.
A greedy dwarf who got too greedy, hoarded his gold, and turned into a dragon, essentially, yeah.
Well, and he was the brother of Rhaegon, the blacksmith who sent Sigurd to go kill Fafnir.
Right.
So there are, and he killed his father, so there are kinslaying motifs. It all fits in very well to what George is doing.
By the way, next week for Father's Day will be a Tyrion character stream. So look forward to that. I'll have a brand new guest on the channel you guys haven't met before. And so you'll just have to wait and see who that is, but that'll be fun. So yeah, so there's Tyrion kills his father, of course.
Right.
And he is He is a dwarf and also a dragon in a cave with gold. But now we see he's also a giant. And we just told you, giants play that same role, hoarding the gold in the cave. So, yeah, it all fits with Tyrion's various archetypal identities.
Well, and it's funny because like Fafnir turns into a dragon after he kills his father to defend the treasure hoard. Tyrion goes across the sea to serve Daenerys, the dragon, after he kills his father. And another thing that we've kind of connected it up to during the God stream was the idea of like Tiamat and Marduk and Enki, with Enki being the kind of mentor of Marduk who trained him to fight against Tiamat. And so they're all against Tiamat, who's like the incarnation of salt water, poison water. So as Tyrion goes across the sea and he's throwing up the whole time and he's drunk and blah, blah, blah. So he's sick because he's in the salt sea. But it's all very funny. But yes, Fafnir, start to finish, cursed gold of the Lannisters, essentially.
And the Dragon Lords were afraid of the gold of the Lannisters, too. So that's kind of an extra funny commentary on that.
Yeah.
So then we got Peter. He is, of course, a giant because his family's sigil is the head of the Titan of Braavos, even though he has switched it. So he's a giant in disguise. And he lives on the giant's lance in a giant's castle. He's actually Thiazi from Norse myth. And Thiazi is a Jotun. He's an ice giant. He steals Idun and her apples. And remember, those are the apples of immortality. This is like Peter abducting Sansa. Sansa is a kind of apple, okay? And so basically the apples of immortality are what the gods of Olympus need to keep eating so they don't grow old. Turns out they're not immortal. It's the apples. So they're very upset. Loki helps Thiazi steal Idun and her apples. Then the gods force Loki to go and rescue her. And so Loki, borrowing a skin from Freya, turns into a falcon and flies to the top of the cold mountain to Thiazi's ice castle and turns Idun into a chestnut, into a nut, so that he can carry the nut in his mouth and fly away. Thiazi catches on, turns into an eagle, and gives pursuit. And as they're flying back to Asgard, the gods see them coming and they light a fire right after Loki passes that catches Thiazi. And so Thiazi in eagle form is burned out of the sky, falls to the ground, and they attack him and kill him. So this is like Orell's eagle flying over the wall and getting burned. First of all, just a little quick shout out. But the main thing you think of is the falcon knight symbolism of the Vale and the giant's lance. You know, the House Arryn has the falcon sigil because of the falcon knight who flew to the top of the giant's lance and battled with the Griffin King.
And then you have, obviously still the Arryns with Sweet Robin being both a robin and a falcon. And they're grappling with another bird, Peter, the mockingbird. So it's two different birds again. It's a problem. They've got all the frost symbolism of the Vale. But another thing that you will notice here is that he's got Tyr in his name. And he's the one who's messing around with wolves. And eventually it's going to bite him in the ass, or more operatively, his hand.
So he's Thiazi and Tyr. Yeah, that makes sense. And there's a kenning for Thiazi that involves she-wolf. Which is about his abduction of Idun. So there must be some she-wolf aspect to Idun. I have not been able to fully research that and figure that out. But obviously that just lines up even more with Sansa. So the Thiazi story is a major inspiration for the Peter and Sansa story. And of course, Sansa, I just said Idun is turned into a nut so she can escape. Sansa dyes her hair chestnut brown.
Yeah.
To hide. So
I also have him
very tight parallels. Peter also possesses Harrenhal, which is a giant's castle, as Rhaegar will tell you.
Yeah. Another, just to kind of preview, we were talking about at some point we got to do an Arthur stream. I have Peter as a huge Lancelot figure.
Yeah, definitely.
Like the
Let's come
parallel
back to that. I
starts
want
there
to
on
do an Arthurian
sure.
stream. I also want to do an Arthur and Ashara Dane stream. So yeah, we'll figure out how we'll package it. We'll do something like that. We talked about Argos Stone Skin already. We talked about Serwyn. We talked about the Nameless Hero. Oh, look at that.
We done it. Just in
That's
time.
it. Okay, so let's see here. One of the things that I sometimes fail to do with these longer presentations is to kind of button it up with a good summary. So let's do that. What have we learned today, Sean?
What
Would you
we've
say?
learned that across different mythologies, giant is less about being large human looking things and more about understanding the esoteric concepts of nature and how they led to the world that we have.
Well said. Very well said.
Thank you.
And so that is we see, like I said, the idea of Atlas holding up the world, or this giant who represents the cosmic pillar, represents the directions, represent these powerful forces like time, and the flow of time. These are things that define our existence, and you can smash yourself against them if you want to. Like it's a better idea to outwit them, which means understand how they work and work around them, kind of. Is essentially what it means. So, yeah, there's no point in being afraid of the progression of time because it is inevitable, right? There's nothing you could do about it. So we have to live with it and deal with it, something like that. But yeah, so in A Song of Ice and Fire, we can see how the concepts of giant work pretty well for the Weirwoods, as this sort of part of the elder races and part of the dimensions of the world, the thing that holds up existence and defines existence, something that is irresistible and powerful and eternal. So these are all giant ideas that are sort of conferred onto the Weirwoods. They're also guardians to the other realm, like the giants often are, and they have treasure to be gained. You can go into the Weirwood net and get treasure, get power. They're like an oracle. The giants are often oracles. And the Weirwood net contains the sea, and the Titans are associated with the sea as well. So, yeah, I don't know if there's, I guess the theory sort of point behind all this is, what are the green men and what is their actual connection to the Weirwoods and what does that have to do with giants? But as always, we can only speculate. If the green men literally step inside the trees and wear them like mech suits, or if they're living under the trees like the current human green seers are. I do think the current human green seers are kind of like a fallen form of whatever the green men were doing originally. And the idea of the oaken seat being a living tree throne that isn't in a cave, because it's not said to be in a cave, kind of implies that the original tree thrones were above ground. So you picture a green man sort of sitting into the trunk of the tree. Like the roots at the base of the tree are forming a throne that he sits in.
Right.
So at that point,
very...
he is the tree face, kind of. Like, yeah, I'm not sure what the connection is, but...
Well, it's something that George has played with in his other properties, and it just kind of folds into Green Man lore. But even in like Night Flyers, where it's set in cosmic space, you sit in the captain's chair, and then he makes a big show about how all the cables are feeding into it, and it's like sitting into a werewood throne with roots, right? So it's very much like connecting up to the werewood net used to be or whatever it used to be called before there were werewoods, right? When it was more of a natural green thing. Now we have this decayed thing that happens down under in the roots, in the barrow where everybody is dead, blah, 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 where it used to be, a way to balance with nature. Now it is a power that has been stolen in order to make war.
That makes sense. The human as the hub of the computer It makes me think of another Tad Williams series called Otherland, and I'm trying to look up when it was written.
Oh, I have not read that.
1996. Oh, that is old enough to be an inspiration. It's a virtual. There's a virtual reality, very advanced virtual reality network with all these interrelated worlds, and it turns out that the computer network is supported, in some sense, by a very weird organic brain. I won't go into more detail because the detail of it is super cool and it is worth reading. But it has this idea of like a powerful human brain as the center of a network. So yeah, it's an idea that's floating around out there.
Well, I mean, where was it more prevalent than in The Matrix?
Yeah, The Matrix is similar. Stuff everyone, we were all thinking about this in the 90s, you know.
Right.
Computers freaked us out a little bit and still do for some of us, as well they should. So
Y2K it's just late. It's coming and it's going to be terrible.
what do you mean by that exactly?
Oh, nothing. That's ridiculous.
Okay. All right. Okie doke. Well, I will just take a moment to ask the chat if they have any final questions about giants that they would like us to answer. We answered the most pressing question about giants, which is, you know, how Ned grips Robert's hammer. So we covered that. And we got everything I wanted to get.
God, Robert's Warhammer. Yeah, I did love the imagery, the thing that we were talking about with on the Fist of the First Men, where they're just firing, you know, shooting fire arrows out at the frost giants. Like, that's so indicative of everything that we were talking about.
Did
Fire
we ever
giants.
get to the super chat about giants and Essos? Yeah, well, I don't know if I addressed the super chat, but we definitely talked about the Jogwin.
Yes. And I mean, like, the stone giants, and like their bones are still in the Bones Mountains. Like, yeah, it's all it's a mirror. And you mentioned it to a point.
Yeah, between that and like Gregor Clegane being the mountain that rides and using his giant's lance on Hugh of the Vale, like, he's really showing us that mountains are giants and giants are like mountains come to life.
And his voice sounds like stone breaking.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a stone giant. Like, the man looked as if he was made of stone, blah, blah, blah.
So John specifically keeps Woon Woon around at the wall because he thinks more giants may turn up at the wall. And that it'd be good to have somebody that can talk to them. So, yeah, they're out there. They're in the north, and they may turn up. They're not friends of the others, so...
You want to defend your herd from sheep or from wolves, you domesticate one of them.
That's it. Throw a suit of armor on that old Woon Woon. Thoughts on Buster Posey so far? I don't follow baseball that closely. I'm sorry. Basketball, yes. Baseball, no.
He's announcing now.
Speaking of which, we got 20 minutes until game time. You think the Thunder will win tonight?
Yeah, I mean, they're at home. They'll make some adjustments. The Pacers punched them in the mouth in game one. The Pacers are hard to figure out. And they're out coaching them too. They have a very interesting new style of basketball. I like it. But yeah, the Thunder have outrageous talent.
I watched some Angry Coaching channel coverage of game one. Love that channel. And have you seen that one?
No.
I'll share it with you later. It's really funny. It's a guy that just goes apoplectic about basically pick and roll coverage, and he just yells expletives at the highlights. It's very cathartic. He's pointing out the Thunder have some real holes in their drop coverage. They go the wrong way on screens and leave people open and stuff. Indiana has found some weak spots, so I'm curious to see if the Thunder will close those. Their defense might be slightly overrated because they have so many good individual defenders,
Right.
but there are still holes. So
Yeah, the
Go
rotations are not.
Pacers. We'll see.
I do like the Pacers. I like them a lot. They're fun to watch. I like that they're kind of inventing something new over there. But yeah, the Thunder have an outrageous amount of individual talent. That's going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, we have more effectively than saying the stream is over. We have announced that the stream is over for the nerds. That's right, folks. It is basketball time. Thank you very much. Check out our YouTube channels. Sean's is linked below here with 1,000 voices. As you can see, he's quite the voice actor, so you'll hear some of those voices on his videos. And you can check out his Patreon link from his YouTube channel, and my Patreon link is below. If you like what we're doing and want to keep it alive, then that's how to do that. Sign up for Patreon. We're doing t-shirt giveaways. We got an art gallery. You get access to our secret stream recordings, which, by the way, we're going to do one this week. I will announce it on Discord. I'm sorry, I meant to have the day ready today, but I don't have the day ready. It'll be somewhere between Wednesday and Friday. And so I just put out the new Discord link this morning on Patreon and also for YouTube channel member squishers. So if you join via either of those things, you'll get the link and you can come to the secret stream where I'll announce it on Discord. And Discord, by the way, is a fun place to be. So there you go. Those are the announcements. I've been David Lightbringer. This has been Giants. Look out for a video from me this week. And that's it. Thanks for coming on, Sean. I didn't spoil it. Sorry, what'd you say?
And I didn't spoil it. The video coming.
You didn't? No.
No,
I've got a bunch of videos coming, guys. I've got Night Fort. I've got something about Brand the Builder that's going to blow you guys away. I've got all kinds of stuff. So yeah, make sure you're subbed. Many videos in the works. Thank you for watching Dracomorph, by the way. And enjoy the rest of your weekend.